Abraham was one of the warrant soldiers who followed Landon to Baymard. As Landon finished his battle speech, Abraham felt heat surge through his chest. Back in the capital, stronger knights mocked him daily. He had come to believe he was naturally inferior. Baymard proved he was wrong. He had not been lacking in talent. He had been lacking in guidance. Here, he grew stronger and sharper. He learned real tactics and practical combat. He also saw that his king was not like other nobles. Since arriving, the people ate well and stood on their own feet. Joy had returned to their faces. He remembered what Baymard looked like when he first came, thin, hollow-eyed people like the beggars of the capital. He did not want it to return to that. He had brought his sister and father with him. His father, once a chimney sweep in the capital, now worked in the food industry and earned more than he ever had. His sister, who used to spend her days cleaning at home, worked as a caretaker for children and loved it. With everyone content, how could Abraham not hate the threat that loomed? Baymard was their home and their haven. Now, a greedy noble wanted to strip it bare. Abraham knew that if such a man took over, everything they had built would vanish. Nobles like that did not care about people or soldiers. So he chose to fight. For his king, for his sister and father, for his friends, himself, and for Baymard. He was not alone. Many soldiers had brought families. Others had found friendship and purpose inside the walls. None of them would give it up. When the enemy messenger rode away from Baymard for the second time, Abraham tightened his grip on the cannon. Sweat slicked his palms. His heart hammered. Fear and excitement twisted together. So this is war. Terrifying. Nerve-wracking. Also thrilling. Responsibility felt like a weight across his shoulders. When the enemy pushed to 900 meters, Landon gave the order. Steady, steady, fire. Boom, boom. The cannons roared. Crews reloaded in practiced rhythm. Out in the field, confusion spread. On a bright, cloudless day, thunder cracked and flame flashed. Horses screamed and bolted. City Lord Shannon scowled. The infantry should charge before the archers, yet his riders were breaking ranks without a single arrow in the air. Something whistled past and struck the earth. Boom! The ground jumped. Rumble rolled through the line. Dirt and stone flew. In seconds, more than 100 men and horses littered the field. Blood ran from ears and noses. Limbs were missing. Some riders were trampled where they fell. Others lay still and silent. Panic followed. Even veterans feared what they could not understand. Whispers reached toward the gods of their ancestors. Then the next volley came. On the walls, Lucius and the warrant soldiers had seen test shots before. Seeing cannon fire tear through living lines was another thing entirely. The new recruits stared stunned. So this is what a cannon does. Barry's eyes and mouth hung open. How can anyone fight against this? The field turned brutal. A ball clipped a horse and took all four legs. The rider opened like a flower. Shockwaves crushed those nearby who were not directly hit. In places, organs lay in the mud. It was horror. They remembered Landon's words about the enemy's courage or stupidity. He had not been wrong. Still, this was necessary. The invaders had come to kill them and sell their women and children. Mercy would not be returned. If the situation were reversed, Baymard would be ash and its people in chains. That was war. They had all worked for peace here. To keep it, they would give everything. Baymard was different. Service felt meaningful. Minds had opened. Life was good. Pay was fair. Neighbors were kind. Someone wanted to take it all. As their king liked to say, hasta la vista. Across the field, City Lord Shannon's thoughts took another turn. He did not flinch from the carnage. He saw opportunity. This was the weapon he needed to take the Western territories, maybe all of Arcadina. Greed brightened his eyes. He had to have those guns. His men were already falling back. He snapped at the officers. Any man who deserts will have his family killed. Fight, or your family dies. He turned his gaze to Baymard, eyes hard as flint. Soon, he told himself, it will all be mine. As the battle dragged on, City Lord Shannon's obsession grew. I must have those weapons. He squinted up at the walls, eyes bright with mania. He convinced himself the flying objects were thick metal arrow tubes. As a veteran, he trusted his instincts and ordered archers forward to shoot them down. Boom! The idea failed instantly. The volley blew his archers apart. "No, you idiots! Can't you do anything right?" he shouted, color draining from his face. Then he yanked at his hair and laughed. "Ha, brilliant! I must have them." To his knights, he looked possessed. 2 hours passed. On the walls, Baymard's new recruits watched in awe. Their king had ushered in a new kind of war. With his power, Baymard would not fall easily. 85% of the enemy lay dead. 5% were gravely wounded. The remaining 10% fought on, barely. Out in the field, formation broke. Knights scattered and screamed. A cannon struck near Baron Rogers. I can't hear. Help me. What is happening?" he cried, staggering. Blood ran from his ears. He turned to flee. Shannon saw him and rushed over. His blade punched through Rogers' chest. "You!" Rogers' mouth then collapsed. "Coward!" Shannon spat. The surviving knights shivered. They understood. There was no way out except death. On the walls, Baymard's soldiers felt sick. This is why one for all mattered. Has the world always been like this? Landon watched Shannon's frenzy and shifted his plan. The knights wanted to retreat, but could not. They were hostages. If Shannon escaped, their families would die. "Turn the guns on Shannon," Landon ordered. "End this." Earlier, he had asked the system about wiping memories. He did not have the points to erase so many. He needed to keep news of Baymard's weapons from spreading. If knowledge got out, greedy nobles would come for them. Baymard was still too weak to face a coalition. He felt pity, but at least 98% of the invaders had to die for Baymard to live. He would spend, at most, 10% of his points to rewrite what remained. That meant their numbers needed to fall. He looked at the horses and felt a stab of guilt. They were more innocent than the men. Many lay with skulls split or bellies torn. Yet even in panic, their instincts were sharp. He had seen mounts fling riders and bolt before shots landed. By now, more than 4,000 horses had survived unhurt. Only about 200 knights remained. Shannon raved as his army dropped in clumps. Why? Why can't I win? I will not lose to this brat." A shadow rolled toward him. He looked up and snarled. "Come then. Let me see what you are. I am the king of the Western Territory. No one can." Boom. 2 cannonballs hit, one to the chest, one to the legs. Shannon came apart where he stood. The guns fell silent. 86 men remained. They began to cry from relief. "We are saved." They had wanted to run for a long time. With Shannon dead, their prayers felt answered. They lifted the wounded and limped away. As they fled, Landon rewrote their memories with false ones. In the new story, their lord received an urgent summons to the capital. 3 cities beyond Riverdale, 15,000 mercenaries ambushed them and killed him. The system had already pulled a royal letter from Shannon's body that mentioned a recall to the capital. The cover would hold. Baymard lay in the opposite direction, and no one would believe Landon could hire 15,000 blades. When the last enemy vanished, Landon looked over the field. Red soaked the grass that had been bright green that morning. His first war. What a cruel world. So this is what veterans meant by painting the fields red.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
While the soldiers of Baymard were celebrating their first victory, things went a little downhill for Santa. Keaton's city, the Empire of Corona. / Young Master, are the first, second, and third princes still asking you to pick a side? / Santa looked at the 3 open letters on his desk and smirked. The present king of Corona wished to step down from his throne and appoint one of his sons as the new king. In Corona, there was no such thing as crown prince. All the princes had a somewhat fair shot of being king, provided they had enough support from the nobles and knights. It was just the male nobles and all knights within the empire that were allowed to vote. Ordinary folks and peasants were not allowed to vote, talk less of women. There were 3 parts to the process: voting, court trials, and oaths. After the standard voting period, all male nobles above the age of 15 were to go to court on a particular day and sit behind the prince that chose to support. Once seated, all the princes would try to win over more people with their speeches and whatnot. If anyone felt moved by another prince, they could go and sit on the chairs under that prince's side. During the trials, the king would ask the princes questions like what they would do for Corona, how they would handle threats from other empires, and so on. As for the knights, since they voted the first time, they wouldn't need to do it again. After the trials, all the princes were to swear an oath, ensuring that everything they had said and promised would be made possible if they were to be king. At the end, the total number of people seated under each prince would be summed up and recorded down again. Within the next 2 days, the king would discuss the result with his ministers. The king would look at the potential immorality of all his sons, as well as the number of votes that they had gotten. All the questions asked during the trials were to test their potentials and their hearts. The king didn't want anyone who didn't have the interest of the people to rule, irrespective of how many votes they got. He also needed someone who could also be somewhat cruel to their enemies. Their potential could also be evaluated from how many people they had gathered from their speeches. To make people change their minds was not an easy feat. So the king wanted to see how many nobles left or added onto each prince's side. Being a leader is knowing how to sway and control the opinions of the masses. A weak-willed king could easily lead to a revolt from the people or worse. There were always nobles who secretly opposed the idea of having one family rule forever. A weak-willed king would give these people the opportunity to rally up the masses against he royals. The king had to also make sure that the future king was not cowardly, greedy, or short-sighted. He definitely didn't need a prince who would sell out his empire because of greed, or one that would run away cowardly in the face of anger. He needed a prince that would die for the empire, even if the enemy had successfully invaded the empire. In fact, within these 2 days, the king would evaluate all his sons, and the best candidate would be chosen. And on the 3rd day, the new ruler of Corona would be announced. Even though the previous kings and the present king had Corona at heart, Santa knew that none of the present candidates were up to the task. They were all proud, greedy, and selfish. Although the trials and votings all seemed like a fair deal, it was actually still filled with a lot of bloodshed and violence. Nobles were bribed or threatened to vote by these princes. Most noble families would vote for all the princes just to be safe. The father would vote for the first prince, one of his sons would vote for the second prince, and so on. Those with only daughters could only pray and wish that they made the same choice. Or else, what if the prince they had chosen didn't win? Then wouldn't their entire families face the consequences forever? Santa didn't want to vote because his father and brothers had already covered all the princes, so he was good for now. But for some reason, these princes wouldn't let him go. For over a month now, they had been harassing him and other nobles here and there to show their support to one of them. If Santa really saw someone that was capable, he would definitely vote for them. But it was too bad that none of the princes had the taken after their father. These stupid princes started hiring people to cause trouble for his stores and businesses over Corona. Over the past 2 weeks, 3 of his shops had caught fire, while some were either robbed clean or had their workers harassed daily. Since his stores were made of stone externally, these people knocked out the guards and burnt the goods, wooden structures, and other items within the store. Luckily, 95% of his goods were kept in his estates. He would only supply enough provisions to each store that would last for no more than a week. This was to prevent theft and other minor issues. Even if people broke in, they wouldn't be able to steal much from him. And at the end of every business day, the money made was recorded and brought back to his estates. His 12 chief assistants each had an office in his estates and were the primary accountants for all his stores. Santa had over 9 estates all around Corona. He made sure that the workers came to the estates to get paid, and so on. The streets of Corona were not safe, even during the day. When Santa first started business way back, he had been robbed of all his money and goods in broad daylight. If not for his mother secretly loaning him money to restart again, Santa was sure that he would still be crying over all the money he had lost. His mother had actually been daring enough to steal money from her father's estate and give it to him. He had eventually paid back the entire debt without his father even knowing. Mothers were truly a blessing. That experience taught him that just because the sun was shining brightly didn't mean that it couldn't rain all day. Since then, he became more vigilant and observing. These princes might have thought that they had crippled his businesses, but they were so wrong. How would a puny fire outbreak, robbery, or business disturbances harm him? Please, he was a proper businessman. He had traveled and traded with the other empires within the Pino continent. He also had various stores all over the continent as well. Corona only gave him 20% of his wealth, so he was sure that he would still be somewhat rich. Although these disturbances still affected his cash flow, he knew that they would only be temporal. Once a king was selected and crowned, all these childish stunts would stop. But recently, these princes have really been getting out of hand with him. He needed to deal with all these issues before leaving Corona. This was the reason why he didn't travel to see Landon or his other customers. This time, he could only send his subordinates to the high seas in his place. There were only 5 days left before the trail started. Although he wasn't attending, the sooner it ended the better for everyone in Corona. How bad was the damage this time? Santa asked. Young master, they had gotten some gang members to cause trouble and beat up our staff. His most trusted assistant, Wayne answered with a panicked tone. Have you sent the injured men to the apothecary? I did, young master, but there might be some other problems as well. Go on. What exactly happened? Young master. Woo-woo. 3 young men came over saying that they wanted to see what products we had. Then one paid for something and ate it. He later started coughing and acting as if he was dying. A lot of people crowded around him while trying to help him up. Then out of nowhere, people from the Juba gang came and said that we were selling poisonous products to the people. From there, they took it upon themselves to beat up our staff. Now, people think that we are selling poisonous products. Our reputation is almost ruined now. Woo-woo. Young master, we need to address the issue immediately, Wayne exclaimed. Santa looked at the overdramatic Wayne and couldn't help giggling. Young master, this isn't funny. What do we do? Why can't the young master be serious for once? Wayne thought as he looked at Santa helplessly. Huh? Wayne calmed down. Santa said while trying to hold his laughter. The sight of an anxious Wayne always made him laugh. Wayne would always panic over any major or minor issues Santa had. Sometimes, Wayne would even go as far as losing sleep over these problems. Santa just didn't like to worry over things that he couldn't change or things that had already happened. He only cared about moving forward. Santa was the kind of person that was always one step ahead of his enemies. Wayne, how long have you known me? Do you think that these trivial issues would affect me? But. Wayne paused, and his eyes immediately lit up. Young master, do you have a plan? What do you think? The Royal Barn Palace, Arcadina. Alec Barn looked at his ministers and was truly disappointed in them. He knew that they had been bribed by his second and third sons to do this. But how dare they disregard his orders? He himself was a scheming and conniving person, so he could easily spot the craftiness in those 2 sons of his. In his mind, his only good son was Eli. No matter what troubles Connor and James caused for him, Eli had never responded to them. Eli was always calm, kind, and looked rather innocent in Alec's eyes. But what Alec didn't know was that his supposedly innocent son was just too good at hiding his emotions and his schemes. Eli was no doubt the worst of his brothers. Eli was the male version of a female White Lotus. Alec was also sure that since Eli was already the crown prince, he wouldn't need to go about looking for trouble aimlessly. Hence, he trusted Eli more than his other 2 sons. Deep down, Alec was truly happy that his younger sons had openly challenged his authority, rather than trying to assassinate their brother. They were still his sons, so he still wanted them to live in harmony. He believed that none of his children would be as daring as he was back in his days. He was sure that none of them would ever try to assassinate the other. Did he regret what he did to his family? Absolutely not. As the first prince, It was his given rights to be the crown prince of Arcadina. But his father gave the position to his younger brother, Odin. How could he take this? He despised Odin ever since they were little. Why was Odin so intelligent? Were the gods of his ancestors really against him that much? Odin excelled in both academics and knighthood. To make matters worse, all the people loved him like crazy. Alec thought that Odin was a fool. Odin would often go about in the market area, helping those disgusting peasants in doing manual labor. Sometimes, Odin would also go to the healers' mansions and help out in treating ordinary people's injuries. ***ing disgusting. How can a prince touch the wounds of a low-life dog? How is he fit to be the crown prince? Alec knew that even till now, his people only feared him and never truly approved of him as ruler. Even till this day, his brother had still won their hearts. Why couldn't his brother's memory just die and fade away? If he was so smart, how come he died so easily? Alec didn't regret anything at all. The strong had always prevailed. That was the way of the world. Who asked Odin to be so weak-hearted? TSK. Serve him right. Alec still remembered the day that he killed his father and Odin. He had slipped poison in Augustus' wine just before he headed out to kill Odin. After killing Odin, he headed back home to see his dying father. He looked at his father's dying face and spat on it. He confessed to the old man and even offered to ease the old fool's pain by stabbing a knife in his throat. Augustus was so shocked that he became speechless. Once he heard Alec say that he had just killed Odin, Augustus closed his teary eyes and died with regret. Alec sneered as he looked at his father's face. In the end, he had won. He would be the new ruler of Arcadina. What gods of his ancestors? If they were truly against him, they would have protected Odin and Augustus from dying. But since they let his father and brother die so easily, that meant that it was the will of his ancestors for him to rule Arcadina. And with that mindset, he began his killing spree. Ever since that day, he had killed all the nobles that opposed him and firmly ruled over Arcadina as a true dictator. His words were always the law, and no one dared to question them. But now, his ministers were trying to make him change his mind about Eli. Dream on. So to say, they were disagreeing with his choice on who was to be the next ruler. He had to say they had really gotten a lot ballsy over the last month. He had a nagging feeling that his second and third wives, as well as his sons, had a hand in this mess. He had to really applaud his first wife for her calm attitude about the whole charade. Although his love for her had died ages ago, she was still Eli's mother. Hence he decided to show her support because of Eli. Now that King Barn had aged, he had also added 3 young harlots in his palace. In this era, prostitution was allowed because it was believed that it helped prevent the greater evils of rape, sodomy, and masturbation. Since these girls were too low in class to be taken in as wives of a king, he had the apothecary make drugs that would make them barren with time. Of course, these women were ignorant of King Bran's schemes. So of them even dreamed of having a son to the king. But who would have thought that King Barn would be one step ahead of them? King Barn would often ask the stewards and cooks to place these drugs in their foods and drinks. How could he, the all-powerful King Barn, have a child with a mere harlot? TSK. It would be an even bigger disgrace than what he faced with Landon's mom. Because of their young and seductive looks, King Barn had been disgusted with the appearances of his first and second wives. As for the third wife, she was still very slim and very sexy. So she was the only one that still enjoyed love making with King Barn. After giving birth to their children, his first and second wives had lost their flat bellies and their slender figures. They became larger and had added a lot of weight on their buttocks. Whereas the thin and slender women that he had married. Actually, his wives weren't fat, they were just cavia. But in this era, being thin was in vogue, and cavia, heavier women, were seen as unattractive. When he compared the slim harlots to his wives, he began to wonder what he ever saw in them. A woman's place was in her husband's kitchen, house, and bedroom. As his wives, since they never worked a day in their lives, what was the point of keeping them if they became repulsive in his eyes? Pui. He couldn't even stand talking to them. That was why he had given them courtyards far away from his. He'd rather never make love again than to sleep with those fat pigs. So disgusting. Backslash my king. I truly think that Prince Connor is the best choice for the throne. Backslash, one of his ministers said. Backslash, he's right, your highness. Prince Connor is an excellent choice, backslash. Backslash nonsense. Everyone knows that Prince James is the best choice for kingship, backslash. Backslash, that's right. He might be young, but he has proven himself time and time again. Backslash. Backslash, no, it's Prince Connor. Backslash. Backslash Prince James. Backslash. Alex sat in his chair and held the urge to jump up and smack all his ministers in the head. Proven themselves time and time again. How come he never witnessed these miracles of his other sons? Backslash. So no one is supporting my son Eli. Backslash. King Barn asked coldly, as looked at his ministers who had their faces towards the ground. Backslash, your majesty, it's in. Not that we don't want to support Prince Eli. B. But the people want another prince as the crown prince. Backslash. Backslash, that's right, your highness. The other day, there were thousands of people gathered in the black market who wanted Prince Eli removed as crown prince. Backslash. Backslash, your highness, Prince James in particular cares about the people very much. He gave food and money for them to take care of themselves. Backslash. Backslash, your highness, Prince Connor also visited the hospitals and in the poor around the capital. I think it would be good to give him a chance. Backslash. Bang! Alec hit his hand on the arm of his chair violently. Backslash, so you all are telling me that the prince that I, King Alec Barn, chose is not good enough to rule? Backslash, Alex said with a bone-chilling tone. The ministers shivered with fear at the sight of their angry king. Backslash, no matter what you all say, my choice will always be Prince Eli. So I suggest you all think things through thoroughly. Anyone who doesn't agree can hand over his life to me. Backslash, everyone quickly shivering while bowing their heads in fear. Their king was truly scary when he was angry. Alec looked at his ministers and sneered. A bunch of cowards, fear was, and had always been the only way that he could control them. Backslash, now let's talk about the upcoming assignments. How do you all plan to divide the work? Backslash. Backslash M, my lord. So far, we have lost 5 cities around the border. So we propose that since there are 3 princes, let each prince head over to each city and try to take them back. Backslash, a brave minister answered instantly. Backslash, yes, my lord. As for the other 2 cities, we had already sent letters to City Lord Shannon of the West and City Lord Barang of the South, telling them about their mission. Backslash, another minister added. Actually, the ministers did this so that if one of the other princes did well in the battle, their king would be impressed and willingly change Eli as the crown prince. This was their plan B. Backslash good. Let each prince and the 2 city lords be the main leaders in charge of securing the cities. But it still won't be enough. Have 4 other city lords and their armies aid each leader to take back the cities. But let me be clear, if they can't succeed in taking back our territories, they should just die there and never come back. I will not allow useless men to live and thrive in my empire. Backslash. It had been 3 days after that unpleasant war at Baymard. The soldiers now took their military lessons more seriously. They wanted to further understand all the side effects and injuries one could get from cannons, should in case they were one day attacked with these kinds of weapons. They also started taking their first aid classes more seriously as well. When they remembered the gruesome sight of their enemies, they couldn't help but shudder a bit. It was better to be prepared than to be sorry. After that battle, the soldiers had gathered all the swords and armor together and sent them to the construction company. The weapons were to be melted and used any way that deemed fit. Landon thought that it was better to completely destroy all the evidence of war at once. In this era, shields and other weapons were marked depending on their territories. If the men one day left with these weapons, people would start wondering how they got access to Riverdale weapons. Within these 3 days, Landon and the soldiers went out to the fields and cleaned up all the dead body parts lying around. They had picked up ears, eyes, and other body parts. Even an entire leg was seen lying about on the fields. Landon had the men pile up all the body parts and burn them in a huge bonfire. Since they were enemy knights, it was a taboo for them to be buried here. In this era, people believed that burying your enemy on your land would curse and bring bad fortune to the land. Since they believed into the fact that their ancestors were gods, they also believed that the dead men would one day turn into powerful ancestors that would hinder Baymard's growth. It was also believed if they were buried here, these men would even have the power to block their wives from childbirth, give their families terrible illnesses, and so on. After all, these men were their enemies, so they would never spare their children and families for many generations to come. Of course, Landon didn't believe in all that hocus-pocus, but since his men believed in it, he had no choice but to burn all the enemy knights. Once they were burnt, their ashes were gathered and taken far away from Baymard by carriage and dumped closer to Riverdale City. The men had secretly dug out a large hole in the forest closest to Riverdale and buried the ashes into the ground. Before leaving, they also burnt the wagon and also buried the ashes of the wagon in the ground. This was done because they were afraid that someone might actually use this wagon to enter Baymard one day. Also, since some traces of the dead knight's ashes were still on the wagon, the only choice was to burn down the mother ****. They had buried the ashes because they were afraid that the wind might successfully blow these ashes miles away back to Baymard. The men had said that it was better for the dead knights to haunt Riverdale than Baymard. Landon was speechless. His soldiers had really pulled a James Bond stunt. Just because of this, can't they use their skills for something better? The funny thing was that when they came back, they looked so proud of themselves, and even went as far as saying mission accomplished. Who the heck gave you that kind of mission? Did I tell you guys to go about sneakily into the enemy's forest region? And how the heck would the wind blow ashes 2.5 hours away from Baymard? Aren't you guys being a little too paranoid? As he looked at the proud expressions on their faces, he didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. All this because of the ancestors? Really? His soldiers didn't even want to throw the ashes into the sea, because they feared that the waves would bring the ashes back to the surface. And there was another ridiculous story about enemy ashes that touched the sea, which Landon was fed up with. At this point, Landon couldn't even be bothered with them anymore. Once the dead bodies had been successfully removed, the areas on the field that holes were filled with ground, crushed stones, and grass. As for the blood, Landon had mixed a lot of luminol chemicals with some water and sprayed the mixture all over the fields. Luminol was always used back on Earth for crime investigations. It was the perfect chemical to remove all blood stains thoroughly. The thick reddish fields that once looked like someone sprayed a giant bottle of ketchup on them were now looking green again. All the evidence. When Lucy found out about the war that day, she was so shocked that she forgot about the date. When did the war happen? How come she didn't know anything about it? Normally, the citizens in the central regions would hear the cannon shots regularly, so they thought that it was just for practice reasons. Those in the lower regions couldn't even hear a single thing, so they were fine. As for Lucy, who was in the upper region, normally the knights would practice in the upper regions, but since the war happened at the gate on the central region, she almost couldn't hear a single thing. She had spent her day teaching peacefully, so how would she know about any war? Lucy began to feel uneasy. Would the enemies come back for revenge? Would they want to destroy her happiness just like that? What should she do? What if those men that Landon let go come back with reinforcements? Landon had painstakingly explained the situation to her, explaining over and over again that Baymard would be fine. It was only after being reassured for at least 10 times did Lucy calm down. Normally, Landon would see Lucy at breakfast or when he got back at night. They would spend 2 to 3 hours daily, talking and laughing merrily. There are also times where he would see her around Baymard as well. Landon understood that she too had a job to do. Sometimes, when he was free, she would be busy with lectures. He felt like he was getting married to a university lecturer. She would come to school early, teach, do research, read, and sometimes stay till 8 or 9 p.m. at school. Even when Landon asked if Lucy wanted her classes reduced, she strongly refused, saying that she would feel empty without it. It had become a part and parcel of her now. Her students looked up to her, and when they saw her around Baymard, they would greet her and tell her how much they appreciated her classes. There was no way she would give up this feeling of accomplishment. Furthermore, It's not like teachers teach all year round. The school break was coming up, so Lucy knew that she would be somewhat free during that time. Since it was already 8:30 p.m., Landon was sure that Lucy was done with her lectures. He waited outside her classroom with a bunch of tulips, which he stole from his own castle garden. Landon meant stole because every time he wanted to pluck any flower from the garden, the three musketeers, Old Man Willow and his friends, would harass him here and there. They kept saying that he had no right to touch the flowers without their permission. Landon was really helpless against those three old grandpas. How could he not have the right to touch flowers in his own garden? Did that make any sense? Funny enough, they had stopped calling him Brad and started calling him Sonny Boy. Landon waited for her class to finish. He peeked at her and smiled. Finally, the class was over. Once Landon was sure that there were no more students in her classroom, he walked in while holding the bouquet of tulips, instantly taking her by surprise. Brother Landon, when did you get here?" "Does it matter?" he replied, while handing the flowers over to her. "These are lovely. How did you know that they are my favorite?" "It's my duty to know, wifey," Landon said while smiling lovingly at her. As usual, her face was flushed as a tomato again. "Sigh, young love. Let's go. I have a surprise for you." This was the last week of June. It was time for the end of the first school semester. This meant exams. The students were already used to their notebooks and pens. It was way better and cleaner than using slate boards and chalk. Landon had given all the children below ages 15. For empty notebooks, 3 eraser pencils and 7 pens, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 red, and 1 green. If they needed more, their parents would buy it for them. And those who were orphans could take them free of charge from the school canteen. The adults who took classes were required to buy their own textbooks as well. After all, they all worked and the books and pens were cheap. 9 pens cost 5 copper coins. 9 pencils cost 5 copper, while 1 book cost 3 copper coins. The teachers still used chalk, of course. With these books, the students could go home and revise their lessons. For those that came to school in the middle of the semester, they would only be given tests on what they know so far. But within the 1-month break, it was compulsory for them to take makeup classes so as to catch up with the rest for the next semester. Those that couldn't catch up would repeat their classes on the next semester, while those that passed would move on ahead to the next phase. All they had been learning so far were language and math. Now, it was time to introduce them into the world of chemistry. Of course, it wasn't intense chemistry, just the basics. With the basics, they could go about and have assignments like science projects and so on. Those that passed and did well would advance and take Math 3, Language 2, and Chemistry 1. Today, the little Princess Linda from Jotun Empire was taking the final exam for the semester. Back at Jotun, 9-year-old Linda was ignored and bullied most of the time. Since she wasn't a favored princess, the maids, servants, and even her teachers looked down on her. The only people who cared for her were her mother Winnie and brother Barry. She would cry daily and sometimes even feel like she was trapped with nowhere to go. But ever since she came to Baymard, the people were nice and she could finally go to school with other children who were very humble. And for some reason, the food tasted better here as well. Landon would come to her school and read amazing stories to her and the other children. She even played on the metal swing and something called a slide. The little princess was very happy. She loved everyone, even the funny Grandpa Willow. He would always put flowers on her hair and push her on the garden swing. Yet, he gave trouble to Landon for plucking tulips. Linda sat in the large classroom nervously. Although she had math teachers and language teachers back in Jotun, she had realized that Baymard's educational system was different. It was way better and more detailed. Plus, she loved her rainbow-painted exercise books, pencils, and pens, which were much better and simpler to use. For the tests, she liked that they were evenly spaced throughout the week, giving her more time to read at home. The moment of truth had come. The teacher placed a sheet of paper face down in front of her. Today, she was taking her first exam, Math 1. Once all the papers were shared, Grace signaled for them to start. Somewhere in another classroom, Linda's mother Winnie, Kim, and Lucy were also giving out the same exam. Today was meant for Math 1, so even if they weren't teaching it, they had to help supervise the exams as well. All tests had different sections within them. Some of the sections in Math 1 and Math 2 were similar to one another, but not actually the same. Math 1 had seven sections. 15% additions, 15% subtractions, 15% playing with operations using plus or 10% number writing, 15% word problems using only plus or 15% measuring length using only plus or 15% measuring time using only plus or. Linda looked through the section titled Addition and began. First question, 145 plus 74 equals? Show rough work. She immediately started using her fingers and even showed the carryover process on the paper. The more she answered, the more confident she became. Time went on, and she arrived at the playing with operations, using only plus or part. Question, achieve the result 20 by using the numbers 2, 6, and 4 as many times as you like. He looked at the question, and her eyes lit up. 6 plus 4 is 10. 10 plus 4 is 15. No. It's 14, she thought. Just like that, she completed that section. Now it was time for word problems. Question, there are 67 bird families living near the mountain. If 32 bird families flew away for winter, how many are left near the mountain? She immediately started writing the main points as she was taught in class. 67 bird families flew away. 32 bird families. This is a subtraction. This is taking away, she exclaimed inwardly as she immediately did the subtractions. When she was at the last section, Grace kindly reminded them to drop their pens, pencils, and papers. She was currently in the last section and had 3 questions left to answer. She couldn't help but curse the 6th section for slowing her down. All in all, she felt like she was going to do very well in the exam. After the exam, she discussed her answer with some of her friends. Did you guys succeed in finishing the exam? I only had 1 question left, and then they took away for paper. Woo-woo. I'm not sure I did well. Don't cry. Who can say that we will all pass? Yeah, plus there's still makeup classes during the break. Don't forget that if you do well in Math 2 and Pyron 1, you will still advance. We have to study hard for the next tests. Question 5 in section 4 was very confusing. It was definitely a trap. And just like that, the Math 1 exam had officially come to an end. 2 days later, the exam for Math 2 began. The exam had 8 sections. 12% multiplication tables, 12% multiplication, 12% divisions, 12% playing with operations using times or divided by, 10% number writing, 14% measuring length using only times or divided by, 14% measuring weight using only times or divided by, 14% measuring time using only times or divided by. Under the section titled Multiplication Tables, Linda moved like lighting. Question, 3 times 7 is equal to? And under the multiplication section, Linda still felt it was easy. Question, 727 times 4 is equal to? Moving forward, Linda realized that she had spent too much time with the section number writing. Question, write 9,461 in numbers. Thousand. It's 1,000. But since it's 9, then it's 9,000. She also spent time doing the measuring length, weight, and time sections. Question, 2m equals? cm. Question, 20 kilograms equals? g. Question, 9 hours, 45 minutes equals? min. Once again, she was unable to finish her exam on time. Was it a curse for her to never to finish on time? She quickly went home and started practicing her pretenses, present tenses, and so on for her Pyron exam. All the people in Pino spoke one language, so the language spoken in Jotun was the same as that in Arkadina. Another 2 days passed, and it was time for her final exam. Pyron 1 was divided into sections. 18% nouns, verbs, adjectives, and pronouns. 18% all tenses, present, past, simple, etc. 9% writing numbers into words. 15% prepositions, 20% choose correct/incorrect sentences, 20% choose complete/incomplete sentences. Linda kept seeing questions like, question, choose whether the following sentence is a simple or compound sentence. Question, which sentence shows the proper use of a noun? Question, write 109 in words. Question, which is not a complete sentence. Question, identify the adverb in the sentence. For her, language was easy compared to math. So for the first time ever, she had successfully finished all the questions for the exam. She even had 10 minutes to spare, so she decided to go over her work once more. Once the exam papers were collected, she truly felt free as a bird. She had never had this type of feeling before. She began discussing with her friend on what they would do with this 1-month vacation. She had been told that the exams would be posted on the 12th day of July. Also, the next semester was going to start in August. So for the entire month of July, she would hopefully have no school. To be honest, she didn't want to spend the entire July doing makeup classes. That's why she earnestly prayed that her results would be at least all right to take her to the next stage. She had been so stressed during this exam period that she didn't even care how her hair looked like when she left the house early this morning. Her mom wanted to fix it, but she refused as she needed to use all her time for studying. She looked at her mom as if saying, "Mom, my holiday is at stake here and you're worried about my hair?" Right now, she didn't even want to see a single book, at least until August. Finally, no more exams. Quito City, the empire of Corona was. Over at Corona, there were celebratory banners everywhere. The food stalls were crowded and busy, while the inns were also full to the brim. Children were running about happily with their parents, while making their way to the side of the palace. Santa stood with his family outside the palace, facing a giant terrace, while waiting for the king to appear. All the citizens were waiting as well. Today was the day that they had all been waiting for. Who would be king? The 3 princes who were already standing on the terrace displayed arrogant demeanors as they watched the people beneath them. The only princess were also there as well. Suddenly the trumpets were played, and the royal message relayer walked on to the giant terrace. Then the royal announcer rushed out to the terrace and took out an iron funnel-like object, which was called a speaking trumpet, also called a loudhailer or megaphone. In this era, the speeches from royalty were made by the royal announcer. These announcers worked like how the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland worked. Their biggest asset was their voice. Since a king was beneath yelling, the royal announcer would use these instruments and read out any document or announcements from the king. The king was just present to indicate that whatever was read out was true. Announcing His Royal Majesty King Carmelo, the first queen, Queen Megara, and the second queen, Queen Othina. Following them is King Adrian and Duchess Veronica, Duke Samuel and Duchess Kate, and finally, Duchess Mina and Duke Richard. The royal announcer yelled out. 12 knights first went ahead and stationed themselves along every main corner of the terrace. Then, King Carmelo stepped out with 2 knights in front of him and his 2 wives, Queen Megara and Queen Othina by his sides. Behind him were the former King Adrian, Carmelo's father, his own queen, Duchess Veronica, Carmelo's mother, Duke Samuel, Carmelo's brother, and his own wife, Duchess Kate. Following them were Duchess Mina, Carmelo's sister, and her own husband, Duke Richard, as well as another 12 other guards behind them. The children of King Carmelo's siblings were also on the terrace as well. Duke Adrian had only married one woman his entire life. This woman was Duchess Veronica, who gave birth to Carmelo and his younger siblings. The siblings really didn't have any issues with each other, since they were blood siblings. Plus, they kind of liked pushing all the work for Carmelo to do. Duke Samuel used to say that he would rather have Carmelo do all the work, while he just sat there and ate all the money. He was really lazy and didn't like work at all. He just enjoyed having night battles. Who had time to do all the paperworks and maintaining all the peace and order within the empire? It was such a drag. Back in their days, when it was time for their own trial, Samuel had faked illness just so that he could miss out on the trials. But King Adrian wasn't having it and rescheduled another trial session. Then Samuel knelt and begged Adrian to pass it over to Carmelo. Samuel had seen all the work his father had put into Corona. Who would like to have such responsibilities? Although he was a good person at heart, he knew that he didn't like ruling the empire. When he was younger, all the royal tutors had headaches because of him. He would skip out on classes and always complain about some illness that didn't exist. In fact, the entire empire knew of Samuel's antics. But they also knew that he was a good person as well. He was, sadly, just too lazy to be king. Because of this, Carmelo had won without even fighting for the position. In all honesty, Carmelo also didn't care who took over the throne. The royal family had money, so he got the same pay as his siblings, even till this day. So in essence, he was just doing all the work while they still got their pay. Now he began to understand Daniel's point. It really was a drag. Corona's way of ruling and allocating funds was completely different from most parts in the continent. You couldn't just take money just because you were king. And if you insulted, bullied, or stole from the people, you would be removed from the throne immediately. But what people feared was that the next kings would change these rules. Rules were made by people and could also be broken by people. That's why one needed to be careful over who they gave the throne to. All the citizens cheered, clapped, and waved their hands at the sight of their king, whom they deeply respected. Once the king had gotten to his normal position on the terrace, he began waving at them with a smile on his face. The queens and the other royals also began waving as well. The people even cheered more loudly, and some people even raised their children in the air to have a better look at the king. Look, he waved at us. Did he just wink at us? The king has a very warm smile. He is still charming after all these years. I couldn't agree with you more. Look, King Carmelo waved at my son just now. Daddy. King Adrian also looked at me. As the people talked and smiled, some people even began crying at the sight of their king. He had done a lot of humanitarian jobs for the people, and everyone knew of his boundless kindness within his heart. Such a king was definitely the best within the entire Pino continent. The people had heard of the ridiculous things that other kings did, and were truly shocked. They knew how fortunate they were to have such a king. Even the previous king was the same as their present king. The people knew that it was due to their practice of choosing an heir to the throne that made them feel safe. But now, they couldn't help but feel that their happy days were coming to an end. Who didn't know the real nature of these princes? They had been going about bullying and treating people like garbage because their father was king. They felt that they deserved everything just because they were royalty. Left to the people, they would rather have their present king stay on the throne till he died. After a while, the king raised his right hand straight up to the sky, and the tune of the trumpets changed, indicating that the citizens should quiet down. Now, it was time to get down to business. King Carmelo handed over a parchment letter to the royal announcer in the presence of everyone, and the royal announcer knelt down and accepted it. This was to tell everyone that the message or paper had not switched hands and had indeed been from King Carmelo. The royal announcer opened it and was stunned. Just what was going on? Party as a counselor for the empire. Although he has left the throne, he will still be here as you all move towards the future. Today, we are all here to welcome a new king to the empire. From today onwards, Princess Penelope will be the next ruler of Corona. The coronation day will be scheduled on the 5th of July. This is the final verdict of King Carmelo. Everyone was stunned. Did they just hear correctly? Princess Penelope? She was the most perfect one to take on the job. Very quickly the citizens all cheered. Unlike her brothers, she was very kind, smart, and knew how to make wise decisions. She had also proven herself time and time again within the empire. At the age of 7, the first time that she saw her brother train with the sword, she would sneak out and hide in the bushes to listen to his trainers. At night, she would then sneak back out of her courtyard with a stolen sword in her hand, as she made her way to the practice field. For over a month, no one noticed her movements. But one day, her grandfather, King Adrian, noticed her sneaking away and followed. At first, he was fuming mad at the fact that she wanted to learn sword fighting. How could a woman have the aptitude for battle? When he was about to stop her, She perfectly executed a move that would take a regular page at least 6 months to learn. His eyes lit up. She clearly had talent for the sword. From then on, he began observing her quietly every night. After a while, her father King Carmelo and her uncle Duke Samuel discovered it as well. The three men started sneaking about at night to observe her movements. They were all utterly stunned by her quick reflexes and aptitude. Then 4 months later, they saw her sneaking into the royal library, where she would read a ton of books on different subjects. They looked at her and decided that they would assist this little cute bunny. Once she was found out, she didn't even flinch under her father, grandfather, and uncle's auras. They had realized their terrifying auras when questioning her because they wanted to see what she would do. She stood there, steady as the water, and smiled at them. The reason why she wasn't afraid was because, to her, they were her family. She had spent enough time with them for her to believe that they would hurt her. Their powerful auras in her eyes were the same as how the three musketeers kept disturbing Landon. She found it extremely cute, but what she didn't know was that these cute auras had made a lot of people wet the pants before. These men were war veterans, for heaven's sake. She was just a curious child and didn't understand why women couldn't do certain things. They had told her that she couldn't wield a sword, but didn't she successfully do it? Doesn't that mean that everyone was lying to her? She really didn't get what the big deal was. She hated doing needlework and all those other things, so what she was doing right now was trying to find things that she loved doing. She had also seen her father read a book, so she thought that maybe reading was also fun. Hence, she started making her way towards the Royal Library at night. When she took the first manual on war tactics, she was intrigued and completely lost herself in it. Reading seemed to be something that she liked as well. Plus, she also realized that she could remember and understand things a little better than others. Once Carmelo and the rest understood her reasoning, they realized that this child of theirs was a gifted one. From them on, she became the only woman accepted as a knight page, as well as the only one who would go on missions and aid the poor. Maybe it was because she was a woman, but most people noticed that she would give it her all to help those in need. She never did anything half-heartedly. If she said she would do it, she would either do it perfectly or die trying. She also helped in state affairs and aided her father, uncle, and grandfather whenever she could. To them, her ideas were genius. At the age of 14, she was already going on missions with her father to fight pirates and bandits that came to Corona. No one wanted her to go, but this little woman snuck into the supply wagon, and when they were already 6 hours away from the capital, they finally discovered her. Or rather, she revealed herself. She was pressed and wanted to relieve herself, so she popped out of the wagon and shocked everyone silly. "Princess, can you not do this? Do you think that we are here for fun?" The knights all thought. Everyone took her as their little sister, so they were worried for the little bunny. Even after her father reprimanded her, she still didn't know what she did wrong. As a knight, wasn't it her duty to fight for Corona? It was then and there that Carmelo and the others realized that although the princess was the smartest person they knew, she was really dense in personal relationships. At this point in time, she was already daddy's girl, so could he not panic after finding out that she had come over on his mission? But what surprised him was that when they were on their way to save a village from bandits, the little princess came up with a clever plan, which was even better than his original one. She also fought bravely and rescued 2 of his knights from the bandits. When they got back to the capital, Grandpa Adrian and Samuel, who had been looking for her for over 2 months, became excited. Her mother, Queen Megara, who was on the verge of collapse, came back to life and cried while hugging her. Why was Mummy crying? Did someone bully her mother while she was away? She didn't get it as well. Without even knowing it, these everyone, including the knights, had taken her as their precious treasures. They all reprimanded her, but it was no use. Nothing got into that head of hers. When they heard of her bravery, they hosted a feast in her honor as the savior of the village. The little princess thought it was bothersome. All she wanted to do was sleep and train. What was the point of this? After that, she had been unexpectedly groomed for the position of king. Or should we say queen? Of course, at that time, none of the men thought that they were grooming her for that position. They just thought that since their little bunny was good at all these things, she should do them. So what if she was a woman? What was wrong with that? Because of Penelope, over the years, Corona had accepted over 200 female knights into their ranks. It wasn't a lot, but it was still progress for women all around the empire. She was a heroine doll. Actually, anyone from Earth would say that she looked like Akame Ga Kill. She was extremely beautiful, and her dark black hair made her look like a moon goddess. She was brave, loyal, and the most shocking thing was that her sword skills could put 90% of the knights to shame. The funny thing about her was that she didn't get relationships between men and women at all. Once, a knight told her that when they look at her, they have a love heartache. All she understood in that sentence was look and heartache. Since then, she would carry the knight to any healer's mansion every time she saw him. She would carry him princess style while requesting for the healer to check his pulse. Haha, all the other knights in training would always laugh at the scene. For them, she was a total badass. It was at this point that most knights started realizing that they were attracted to strong women, who liked all those girls who always waited for you to rescue them. They realized that a woman doesn't necessarily have to fight, but she needed to have standards. She needed to be able to use her brain and not depend on a man to always use his brain for her. Penelope had really changed the game in Corona. Women wanted to do other jobs now, because of her. And now, she had become the first female ruler in the history of the world, Philia. If Princess Jeanette Barr knew about this, she would definitely want to split Penelope's head from her neck. How dare Penelope take her dream as the first female ruler and her shine? Penelope was deeply respected by the knights and was considered as their little princess as well. She had a whole knight fan club, and if any boy even tried to ask her out again, those knights would send daggers towards their way. The funny thing was that she was completely unaware of these occurrences. Seeing the people cheer even louder, Carmelo was sure that he had made the right choice. After the trials were done, Carmelo, Adrian, Samuel, and some other ministers had gathered around and reviewed all the answers his sons had given them. Also, prior to the noble trials, he had requested for his secret guards to monitor their actions. What pained him the most was that they went about threatening the citizens and nobles go vote for them. How could he give all his hard work to those arrogant brats? They would just crumble down all his and Adrian's hard work over the years. And their answers to his questions were also infuriating. Their answers all showed that they were either too greedy, selfish, or too arrogant. That same day, he called Penelope to come over. She answered the questions excellently in front of them all and even swore an oath on it. She herself was clueless as to why they would ask her such obvious questions. Wasn't it the duty of a knight to fight for their empire? Wasn't it the duty of a knight to give their heart and soul for the people? As the men listened to her explanation for an obvious answer, they almost puked blood. Can you not continue to disgrace your brothers even further? It might be easy to you, but they all failed woefully. In fact, even if an examiner multiplied any number to their scores, the result wouldn't change. 0 times anything would still give you 0. What an utter disgrace. Actually, Penelope didn't know about the trials, as she simply didn't pay attention to anything else other than her duties. Before she left the room, they had told her that she would be ruler, which shocked her for the first time in her life. But after 10 seconds, so he shrugged it off and went on about her duties. As everyone cheered on, the 3 princes were fuming inside. Weren't they princes? Wasn't the throne supposed to go to them? How is this fair? Penelope came forward with her sword on her hips and knelt down in front of her father. You may rise, Carmelo said. He then stepped to the side and allowed her to take his place on the terrace. She took the megaphone from the royal announcer, which stunned everyone as well. Princess, speaking is the announcer's job, all right. They were truly helpless against her, but they didn't really mind. They all knew that their princess was the densest of them all. I'm honored to be appointed as the new ruler of Corona. I promise that I will give my all in ruling Corona fairly, and with the same competence, strength, and willpower that I have when training with my sword. I will protect you all, and will continue to ensure that peace and prosperity reign within the empire. With my father, uncle, and grandfather guiding me through, I know that I will be able to fulfill my duties as your queen. As she spoke, she knelt down like a knight and gave them her solemn oath. The people were deeply touched by her speech. One needed to know that she took her sword training far more seriously than her life. For her to say that she would put them at the same level as her training, truly touching. Hail Queen Penelope! Hail Queen Penelope! As the people cheered, the ministers and nobles who had previously voted for the princes were truly happy. After all the threats and warnings they had gotten from those troublemakers, they felt like justice had been served. Those that only had daughters had been worried sick that they had not made the right choice. Who knew if one of these princes would come for revenge? They had heard of all the cruel things that royals of other empires did. So who could say that these princes who threatened them wouldn't do the same? They had watched these princes grow up and knew their bad personalities. As nobles, they children could attend the same night classes as the princes. So how could they not know? Some of their sons had been beaten up blue-black because they disagreed with any of the princes. But now, they could finally put their minds to rest. It was truly a good day in Corona. Santa smiled as he looked at the turn of events. The winds of change were blowing in Corona, and now he could finally begin traveling again after the coronation next month. It was finally July 2nd, and Santa's subordinates had brought 6,800 people to Baymard, as well as 1,000 cows, 600 sheep, 400 chickens, 100 goats, and 400 Angora goats, as well as several planting seeds for sale. Previously, Landon had requested for these animals because he didn't want his people to go around buying them from the neighboring cities. With all the craziness going on in the empire, it would be better to lessen people's suspicions about what was really happening in Baymard. People still thought that the place was extremely poor, and that the people still looked like street beggars. They still had this ridiculous imagination that the people here could fight and kill tourists over a single loaf of bread. Back in the capital, the old Landon had heard numerous ridiculous tales about Baymard, but the present him knew that there was no logic to them. If the people were really that vicious, how come they never formed gangs and attacked different cities or even other tiny villages? They would have resulted into thievery if they really had no way out. Plus, there were wild animals in the forest and fish in the sea. Although they were starving, since their population wasn't much to begin with, they could still manage to pull through. There were probably a handful of people who tried robbery, but Landon couldn't put all the citizens into one category and call them thieves. But in this era, everything idea or story became reality by word of mouth. So in the eyes of most people in the empire, the people of Baymard were wild carnivores that could even eat your entire leg out due to extreme hunger. I mean, Landon really couldn't blame them for thinking that way too. Back on Earth, Landon had heard of different cultures and rules that scared the sh*** out of him. He didn't even want to go to those countries and verify if those stories were true or not. Better safe than sorry. Another reason why no traders, merchants, or even people came over was mainly because Baymard had been exiled from the empire. Who wanted to risk getting King Barn's wrath by coming over here? And why would people travel over for hours just to witness the sight of extreme poverty? This wasn't a theme park attraction. This was an abandoned territory. It wasn't a wise move for merchants and traders. Even ordinary citizens wouldn't leave their towns, villages, and cities miles away just to come here, except they were running or hiding from someone. That's why if anyone ever came towards the city gates, Landon had a 99% hunch that it was an enemy. Although he knew all this, Landon still had no desire to change the Empire's misconception about Baymard. Lastly, Landon didn't want the citizens to be killed while venturing out by either assassins or knights who planned to kill him and seize his land. One could never be sure if more people were coming to get him anytime soon. Hell, they could be on their way right at this very moment. Looking at the animals leave the boat, like how they did in the Bible, Landon became thrilled. He needed milk from the cows, sheep, and goats to make butter. In addition, he also needed to teach the food industry workers how to raise the animals and how to incubate the eggs while waiting for them to hatch. He decided that 50% of the eggs would be sold, and the other half would be hatched to chicks. In fact, for all the animals, he would adapt that same philosophy. Yes, killing animals was cruel, but, people had to eat. These were dark times, all right? Since the people needed meat, He would only kill 5% of each animal type for now. There were no fridges to store the meat, so it was better to start with a low percentage. And if the people needed more, then he would gradually increase the percentage steadily. But he would never go above 50% of each animal type. Of course, he would never kill baby animals as well. He also needed the wool from the sheep for making blankets, carpets, and several clothing items. Sheep had very fast wool growth, so Landon needed to teach the men how to take care of these animals. It was very essential for their wool to be cut, because if it overgrew, the sheep would have several complications. Excess wool would impede the sheep's ability to regulate their body temperatures, making them die from overheat. The urine and feces would also get trapped on the wool, attracting flies, which in turn causes infections and hence endangering their health. They would also have difficulty moving or seeing. As for Angora goats, their fur was needed for making mohair, yarn. Angora goats looked exactly like sheep, but their fur was very stringy compared to that of sheep. Mohair, yarn, was needed to make good winter scarves, coats, hats, suits, socks, carpets, sweaters, and other clothing items as well. Funny enough, because its texture resembled fine human hair, it was also used to make doll wings and so on. Of course, for now, he didn't want to go into textile just yet. He wanted to first use his time to breed the animals properly. He had noticed that Baymard really lacked a lot of pasture around. Sure, there were a few goats and rabbits within the territory, but it wasn't enough. 4 farming seeds. This time Landon bought cotton seeds and all the other seeds that he had previously gotten. Landon also sold several ores to Santa's subordinate at his normal discounted price, of course. At the end, Landon only made 275,000 coins this time. This was his lowest amount so far. He really couldn't help but felt that he had really gone overboard with his spending this time. He had really lost a lot of coins paying for all those animals, seeds, and slaves from Santa. Although he knew that they were all essential to Baymard, it still hurt spending that huge sum of money at once. Landon became curious as to why Santa hadn't showed up in Baymard for the past 2 months now. Was he sick? Did any impending crises befall him? Your Highness, the young master is fine. Actually, King Carmelo of Corona should have stepped down from the throne by now. That's why the young master wasn't here personally. Landon was shocked. He willingly stepped down from the throne in this era. Landon couldn't help but give 2 thumbs up to the old man. After finding out about the traditions and customs of Corona from Santa's subordinate, he had to admit that it was way better than what his bastard father was doing. Landon could also somehow understand why Santa's father would be disappointed in his son not wanting to serve as a knight. Who wouldn't want to serve such a king? But to some extent, he also understood Santa's own way of thinking. Santa just hated rules, and from the looks of it, Santa's own father was even stricter than King Carmelo when it came to rules. If King Carmelo helped the poor out, they would say it's an act of charity. But when Santa worked in the bakery, he became a laughing stock in his city. From what Landon understood, no one really laughed at Santa in a mocking way. They were just teasing him, but in Santa's father's eyes, it seemed like real insult. So the problem only lied in Santa's family. He was also curious to know which son would take over the throne from King Carmelo. But too bad that Santa's subordinate had no clue as well, since he left 2 weeks before the trials had even begun. Once the ships headed out to sea, Landon decided to settle all the newly arrived citizens. Amongst the group of people, there were 312 children, 183 seniors, and 527 people who volunteered for the army. Again, Landon had received 7 eccentric senior citizens that also wanted to prove their worth to him. As soon as Landon saw them walking hurriedly towards him, he knew. He just knew that they were cousins to the 3 musketeers. After spending more time with the 3 old men, how could he not recognize their cousins, the Fantastic 7? Before they even got closer to him, Landon immediately ordered the knights to carry all surrounding stones around the area and dump far away from the beach. And his guess was right. As soon as they arrived, they stared, yelling out very loudly, "Where are you taking those stones to? Hey, didn't you hear us?" Among the 7 were 2 women who kept telling Landon about how they used to wrestle men in their cities. According to their story, they had even wrestled and won against their city lord and all his knights. Of course, he believed that women could actually win if they trained hard as well. But for some reason, he felt that these particular women were lying to him. He would rather believe that human beings can chew molten larvae than to believe their stories. They also bragged about having enough strength to take down his entire army in a single day. Bravo, Hercules, bravo! Landon kept trying to stop himself from rolling his eyes at them. Did they really think that he was foolish enough to believe their tales? Sure, he looked like a 15-year-old kid, but still. Come on. He also succeeded in convincing them to join the Three Musketeers in gardening. It was better to let the two groups compete with each other on who was stronger than whom. Actually, he was looking forward to it as well. He might have to buy popcorn from the system and watch through his system monitors. If he was being honest, Grandpa Willow and his friends made for a hilarious reality TV show. He had been watching them whenever he got bored. Truly entertaining. It looked like the palace would be even rowdier than before. There were also 11 senior citizens who couldn't walk well due to either leg injuries or other health problems. Immediately, Landon requested for 5 open-roof loading trucks to come to the coastline region. He needed 5 because he figured that since he was going to carry the injured people in them, might as well carry all the other seniors too. Once the trucks arrived, the new citizens were shocked. What was this? Why was this carriage so cool? The children were also excited as their eyes shot wide open. The Fantastic Seven started bothering Landon about the trucks. Brat, better speak up now. Are we going to have our own carriages in future? If you give me one, I will immediately engage you and my daughter together. Sure, she's 42, a widow and older than you, but what matters is love. And that carriage. Pwee! Don't listen to him. I have a younger daughter who is 39 years old, way younger than 42. Don't try to cheat us. Will we really have one? HMMP. I'll tell you what, I used to ride these types of carriages when I was younger. I'm not that easy to impress. Landon could really feel a headache coming on. Why would I want your daughters? Do I look like a man who's into women older than my mother? Landon quickly looked at the soldiers who were gently aiding the other senior citizens board the trucks. As they were boarding, Landon told the driver to go slow and steady when on the roads. There were several stones on the road, so it was better to go at a pace that wouldn't bother those injured seniors. Landon also made sure that each truck had at least 5 soldiers on them, just in case of any accidents happen along the way. As the truck started moving again, the seniors on the truck kept shouting, pointing, and commenting as they observed their surroundings. Ah, look over there, what is the structure? Look at those beautiful flowers. Do you think that we will see wild animals on our way? As Landon heard their comments, he almost lost his balance. Do you guys think that you're on a safari trip in Africa? What wild animals? Sigh, forget it. Once the group containing the Fantastic Seven left, Landon continued on with his duties. He assigned 20 more caretakers to look after the children and 158 stable workers for the horses. Now, Landon had 5,600 people available for work. He decided to send 300 workers to the food industry, another 300 as caretakers for all the animals, 300 to the alchemy industry, as well as 700 to the construction industry. The remaining 4,000 would work in actual construction. The animals were placed in the stables of the food industry. One should know that before the industries existed, those estates were used as residence for the barons. Each baron had at least 4,500 knights under their care, and these knights in turn had their own horses. So there were a lot of indoor house stables at the back of every estate. Landon decided to have all the animals stay in those indoor stables for now. Since he was expecting these animals, he had previously requested for the Department 6 of the construction company to build metal bars for each animal shed. He had also brought in a lot of hay and metal trays for the chickens. For the food industry, Landon gave them the task of creating butter and taking care of all the animals as per his instructions. For the entire month, this was their only task. The alchemy industry, on the other hand, needed to focus on soap making for the entire month. The construction industry would also focus on furniture making and porcelain and marble making. Although Landon wouldn't build a gigantic villa as a house, he still wanted the houses to capture the modern essence of beauty. That's why Landon had decided to make porcelain and marble. He needed porcelain floor tiles as well as marble ones. These materials could also be used in making breakable plates, teacups, teapots, and so on. Both marble and porcelain could also be added to furniture, house pillars, and wallpapers to create beautiful designs. Marble in particular could also be used as aggregates for making cement blocks, so Landon thought it was the perfect time to make them. Since the raw materials were available, why not start now? He carefully explained the process as he handed over an exercise book containing a detailed description on the manufacturing process to Tim. Feldspar, ore, clay mineral ore, and sand were used to create porcelain. The raw materials were to be crushed, mixed, and passed through a screen or filter to remove any oversized particle. From there, water would be added and a clay-like product formed. The clay should resemble all those clays in sculpting classes. The workers were to then mold different cups, plates, and so on. The floor tiles were to be spread flatly, using only very thin layers of clay. Once molded, everything would be sent to the fire. And at the end of the day, Landon expected them to also paint and create their own designs on the cups and plates. Who knows, they could make a teacup saying, Father of the Year on it. Landon wanted the workers to use their creative imaginations, so he set up a competition. At the end of the next month, the top 3 designs would win several prizes from him. He wanted to stimulate their minds and encourage their own personal growth within Baymart. As for those in charge of furniture making, they were to get the already cut planks and wooden boards from the wood cutting department and start making bed frames, chairs, tables, and so on. Finally, he was left with his 4,000 construction workers. His thinking was simple. When building a house, it was essential to hook up the water, electricity, and heating before construction. He could do it later, but that would result in more work. If Landon did it after building the houses, he would need to break down the house walls and floors later on just to install underground pipes and sewage systems. That was just double work. Before constructing houses for the citizens, he had to make sure that these 3 industries existed: water and sewer treatment plant, thermal power plant, electricity, and central heating plant. Previously, Landon had 6,000 workers that created heavy machines like tractors. Now that Baymart had over 800 different types of heavy machines, Landon decided to withdraw 4,500 out of those 6,000 and add to them with the new recruits, leaving only 1,500 to continue making the machines. Now, he had a total of 8,500 workers ready for construction. The old workers were now considered as veterans. They knew how to use all the tools and machines, as well as perform quick calculations. They also understood the concept of inches, yards, and so on. It would be easier for them to teach the new recruits while on the job. That's why Landon had put them together. Each old worker would guide and help at least one new worker, since they were almost even in number. Previously, when Landon was teaching the construction workers how to use the machines, they had practiced and already leveled and prepared all the construction sites for building. They used the excavators to dig up and clear all trees and leaves within the area. The construction site that was filled with trees and bushes was now bald. They also made trenches for pipelines around the perimeter of the sites, as well as trenches that would connect all industry pipelines together. The 3-meter wide gigantic pipes had been wheeled into the construction site by the use of lowboy machines. They were basically like those trailers you see in airports that carry luggage to the plane, except this one was for construction purposes. It had no walls, no roofs, just a floor on wheels. Of course, it had several chains to prevent the pipes from falling. They were also good for transporting giant trees from one place to another. With everything organized, it was finally time to start building actual structures. Landon chose to begin with a water and sewage treatment plant. This plant would have 2 main functions: purifying seawater and treating sewage. Landon was sick and tired of using buckets and pit toilets to do his business. As a modern man, how could it not bother him? It was really annoying to have the young butlers in his castle carry the buckets out every day. Honesty, Landon thought that this was human abuse. But the people didn't seem to mind, as if it was nothing at all. Once, he wanted to take out his own bucket of sh***, and one of the young butlers started crying, thinking that Landon wanted to fire him. What the F asterisk asterisk asterisk? Dude, I'm trying to help you, all right? He had already made up his mind that next month he would definitely make pulp and paper. In this era, people washed their asses with either a communal sponge on a stick, reusable rags, corn cobs, old ropes, or their hands. It was so disgusting. Every household would share the same rags or sponges with each other after going to the toilet. As for royalty, after using the sponge on a stick, the butler would clean it up and the next royal family member could use that same sponge. The same thought process went for reusable rags. In fact, there were really few sponges around that Landon was sure that somebody else had used a sponge. He just chose not to think about, because the last time he did, he kept puking all through the night. To make matters worse, the system was a scammer when it came to toilet paper. How could 3 squares of toilet paper cost 20 development points? Was he using gold to wipe his ass? Landon really thought that the system was intentionally making things difficult for him this time. At this point, he couldn't help but blame Truckcoin for seriously killing him back on Earth. If the truck hadn't ran over the red light hurriedly, he would still be alive up till this day. Before dying, he had seen a shocked look on the driver's face, so he knew that it was an accident. Since he didn't want to really blame driver Cohen, the truck was at fault. Sigh, Truckcoin. In this era, the people weren't too big on hygiene, so they didn't mind sharing the same toilet rag or sponge with each other. He had been painstakingly waiting for the time when he would succeed in toilet paper making. On that day, he would probably dance Gangnam Style in his bedroom. For the water and sewage treatment plant, Landon needed several buildings and pipes in place. Since he decided to treat seawater, Landon needed 3 gigantic pipelines to be placed underground from the sea in the coastline region to the plant in the lower region. 2 of those pipelines would be used daily, while the other one would be there as backup, should in case the other 2 needed maintenance or fixing. All the water would pass through the pipes and head toward a 300-square-foot building, which should have different filtering equipment used for filtering out any sand particles or hard rocks from the water. After filtering, the water would still go through several buildings that would focus on filtration and chemical addition until the water is entirely clean. All the tanks needed would be the same size as a regular swimming pool, except for the chemical storage tanks. Landon planned to build these tanks like how one would build an aquarium seal show or a regular swimming pool. There would be safety bars and waist-high iron fences around each pool that wouldn't allow people to come close or touch the tanks carelessly. For water and sewage treatment, it was industrially better for everything to be eye level. Several chemicals would also be added to the water treatment process. Chlorine, for example, would be used for disinfecting the water, and lime for raising the water's pH level, hence reducing corrosion in the pipes. As for the sewage treatment, Landon realized that he needed 11 more buildings within the plant. Wastewater would be collected from toilets, drainage pipes, homes, schools, industries. In fact, from everywhere. So of course they needed their own buildings and treatment tanks. Landon also realized that he needed more buildings that would host the workers' daily necessities. Landon decided to adopt the standard industry setup for a power plant back on Earth. Hence, the industry would have 2 sectors. Before anyone could pass through the main gate, security would check if they were authorized or not. The first sector would immediately follow after the main gate. This sector would have 6 buildings for staff and office personnel, 1 infirmary building, and 1 security building. These 6 buildings would have staff and meeting rooms, large locker rooms for both male and females, a large kitchen, a large cafeteria, bathrooms and showers around the buildings, and equipment rooms. Some of the buildings would be 4 stories high, while some would be less. There would also be a wall and a gate dividing the first and the second sectors. Only authorized personnel, workers, or engineers will be able to go to the second sector. The second sector would have the fire department building, control tower, chemical laboratory building, engineering office building, the production vessels, chemical storage building, and another security building at the gate of the second sector. Landon wanted the plant to be professional. He couldn't allow people to just walk in and out as they liked. The security had to be tight. Only those with badges, access cards, or passes could move in and out of the plant. And even those who worked in Sector 1 couldn't pass through Sector 2 as they liked. That's how it was done on Earth, and that's how he was going to sew it here. No room for errors. One had to be like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible to get into the plant unauthorized. Heck, what if someone wanted to steal important documents in the offices? Or blow up the plant from within? What if an enemy wanted to steal his technology? Or poison the workers? Security was a must. He also needed a car park that would be the same size as that for Walmart or any large shopping center. The car park should also have reserved spaces for the company buses, assigned for picking and dropping workers to home or anywhere within the various bus routes. He wore his safety gear and headed out to the construction site. It was 9 a.m., time to work. Since the workers came to work already wearing their new safety gears, he had them offload the trucks that contained sand, cement blocks, cement bags, aggregates, steel rods, ladders, and all other equipment and materials needed for construction. Before Landon could explain the first step to them, the old workers had already taken out their jotters, as well as their pens. Landon smiled while nodding agreeably. They learned so fast. Within this time, the old recruits had learnt to write down important information in their jotters. Since Landon wasn't there to do everything for them anymore, they started writing down important information so that they didn't have to go through several experiments again. The new recruits were confused about what those stick things, pens, were, and did they just see their colleagues take out tiny manuals? The new recruits started wondering if Baymard was actually super rich for normal workers to afford manuals. Mind you, people didn't have exercise books in this era, since paper was seen as a national treasure. Paper was only used to make manuals, textbooks, or important historical records or empire rules. But to allow someone to waste paper just like that was really something else. How could ordinary workers afford paper? Talk less of manuals. Landon amplified his voice using the system and also demonstrated several times on how the foundation of buildings were to be done. He spent 1 hour repeatedly showing them what to do. And when they finally got it, he broke them up into groups and assigned them to each building and each large tank on the site. Since those tanks were the size of regular swimming pools, their base needed to be made out of concrete as well. The workers first made wooden boards to the sides of the trenches and added crushed stones, gravel, into the trenches. The wooden boards acted as walls, surrounding the gravel and forming what construction workers call the foot. The gravel was also spread around the entire ground floor of the building with the help of wheelbarrows. As for the base, they placed long steel bars which were also held together by steel rods into the gravel. Once the steel rods were placed, the trenches were completely filling with concrete, as well as the building ground floor of the building. Finally, they used the screeds to smoothen the cement on the building floor, making it look even. With 8,500 workers doing this, after 2.5 hours, they had completely laid down the foundation for the entire industry. With this many people, this should have been done in 1 hour. But since it was their first time, it was expected for them to be slow. Now they had to wait for 2 days for the cement to cure and harden before removing those wooden walls and beams around the cement. TSK. Time was money. There was no way that he would let the workers do nothing within these 2 days. Might as well start constructing the other industries. Landon needed them to go to the other construction sites to also place the foundation for their buildings and tanks. Just as he was about to leave, he spotted 2 loading trucks heading their way. It was probably 12:30, lunchtime. The men removed their gloves and aided in offloading the cooking pots from the trucks. There were 20 pots and 20 cooks waiting to serve the dishes to them. There were also 20 other cooks who were tasked in handing out plastic plates and cups to the men. The cooks looked very professional. They had white elastic hair wraps on their heads, transparent gloves on their hands, and wore clean white plastic aprons. There were also several drums filled with water that were offloaded as well. The drums had 4 outlet taps at their bottoms, so that the men could easily get themselves water if they were thirsty. Break time was 1 hour long, so the men had to manage their time wisely. It was better to eat fast, so as to relieve yourself if one needed to. The men formed 20 lines. As they hurriedly took their food, as sat on the grass. Landon didn't want them to eat on the construction site, so the trucks gathered just by the side of the construction site markings. Of course, as king, Landon didn't need to wait online as his food was automatically brought over to him. The privileges of power. Hee hee hee. 1:30 p.m., lunchtime was over. The men loaded all the bags of cement and other materials and equipment into different trucks. Once they were done, they headed out to the second construction site. By 2:15 p.m., they arrived and only used 1 hour 15 minutes to completely layer the foundation for all buildings and tanks on the site. They packed up again and were on their way to the final construction site. By 5:10 p.m., they were done with layering the foundation for all buildings and tanks on site. All the workers were working in the day shift and had spent 8 hours on the job, so by 5:30 p.m., they were required to call it quits for the day. With only 20 more minutes left before closing time, Landon had the men gather up all the tools and drive back to the construction company. Tomorrow, he would focus on installing the iron net-like fences around the sites, since they had to wait for 2 days before the cement completely hardened. For the fences, Landon wanted them to be like regular prison fences that had barbed wires at the top. In future, the barbed wires would definitely be able to electrocute those who try to sneak in. Landon wasn't taking any chances with anybody. In future, without your badge, access card, or pass, don't even dream of seeing the inside of the industry. If someone lost their access cards or pass, someone would immediately come over and verify if they worked there or not. All spies would be electrocuted, period. Royal Palace, the capital of Arcadina. My king, right now the first prince and 7 other city lords are the only ones to arrive the capital to take their assignments. The second and third princes should get back here in a week or two, and by the second week of August, all the other city lords from far away should arrive as well. Once everyone arrives, they will all move out together towards the different cities under attack. Minister Tawny said, "Good. Has City Lord Shannon arrived yet?" King Barn asked. "My esteemed king, he should arrive in August." Ha ha ha. When he arrives, make sure that he sees me before going out on the mission. I need to give him a personal assignment on my behalf. Yes, my king. King Barn looked at his trusted knight and signaled for him to come forward. Summon Princess Jeanette and Captain Anthony here. Eli's old courtyard, the capital of Arcadina. My lord, I think those old ministers are trying to use this war to the advantage of your brothers. My lord, should we get secret guards to protect you? Zarius asked. Right now, Eli had made his way into the capital so as to receive his assignments. Eli stood in his old courtyard and smiled. Why worry about those tiny insects so such? But my lord, I think that they will try to assassinate you again if you don't go prepared, Zarius replied. Who says that we wouldn't be prepared? Do I need to use my brain to deal with these Bafons? The biggest setback is that we can't besiege Baymard. Zarius' eyes lit up. Because of this border war, Eli might not be able to get that Baymard under his control until next year. The official date to head out to the border is on the 15th of August. It will take 2 months to go down south to the border. And once he completed his mission, his father would probably request that he stay there for at least 4 months, so as to make sure that those pesky Diaphorus knights don't bring more reinforcements to take back the land. After 4 months, he would have to take another 2 months to head back to the capital, so as to receive his rewards and have a parade as the crown prince of Arcadina. After the whole ordeal, he would need another 3 weeks to go back to his territory before attempting to attack Baymard again. And one should not forget that Baymard is 4 months away from his territory. That's almost 11 months by horse travel before he could successfully attack Baymard. At most, he could only start his operations by July next year. Apart from Baymard, that damn ghostly prince keeps giving me sleepless nights. The fact that I don't really know his next moves really irks me. Eli exclaimed while squeezing the life out of the orange in his hand. My lord, do you think that while we are away, he would finally make his move? Zarius asked inquisitively. Just before he was about to answer, someone knocked on his door. After 2 minutes, a thick, curvy, beautiful woman walked in and sat on a chair beside Eli. This woman was his mother. Little Eli, once you head out, make sure nothing fails. The sooner you get back, the earlier we can officially start with our plans, said Queen Sarah. "Mom, everything is ready. Don't worry. Although this trip was a little unexpected, it won't stop our plans." "Good. The sooner we kill that bastard, the sooner I will be at peace," Queen Sarah said with an evil glint in her eyes. At this point, she too hated King Barn. Hell has no fury like a woman's scorn. When she was still young, she was officially engaged to him and was deeply infatuated with him. He said that he would love her till they grew old together. Granted, she would always kill and torture those women that claimed to love him too. But did that really make her a bad person? She loved him like crazy and would sometimes ask her father, who was a minister within the court, to find out his schedule so she could accidentally bump into him here and there. If he ever showed interest to any girl other than her, for sure that girl wouldn't last a week. And if the girl came from a wealthy family, she would hire gangs to rape the girl and destroy her public image. Didn't she do it all for love? Wasn't that what love was? Not even 3 months after his marital vow of evaluating love for her, he cheated on her and married another woman. He said that she seduced him and was the one who did all the work in the bedroom. Of course she believed him. How could her love be interested in that slut? But a few months before she was to go into labor, that slut had the nerve become pregnant as well. And 2 days before her labor date, another slut had married into the royal family. And another year after that, a cheap common maid had taken advantage of her drunk husband and gotten pregnant with a bastard child. Why were all these women coming for a man? But she quickly realized that the first 2 harlots were much wiser than the last one. So she decided to first eliminate the last slut. But who would have thought that Chief Commander Lucius would always protect that be asterisk asterisk ch. All these damn be asterisk 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 es made her sick. To make matters worse, it had been 6 whole years since he last touched her. She tried everything, from the latest plum makeup to hiring street harlots to teach her the game of seduction to acting like a pampered princess. What else was she to do? And to top it all off, she is a woman that needed and craved for satisfaction as well. She wasn't asking for too much. Even once a year was a good deal to her at this point. Her husband could have many women, but she couldn't. If she ever found pleasure from any other man, she was sure that she would be locked up in a prison-like courtyard for all eternity. Over the years, the bastard had gotten ordinary street harlots to please him in bed, yet he refused to even look at her. Sometimes, she could hear their screams of pleasures all the way from her courtyard. It felt like torture. 9 whole years of loneliness. She just wanted to be touched. She had been dying inside for ages now. Every time she tried to talk to him about it, he would make up an excuse and run away from her. There were times that he would ask her if she was a dog, because according to him, only dogs went in heat. Out of those 9 lonely years, she had spent 3 years begging for his attention daily. But on the 4th year, her love for him had completely died. She had overheard him talk to a young maid, promising her love and riches if she could sleep with him. He even said that he couldn't stand her because she was fat. Her fat. Ha. It was on that day that she finally realized how stupid she had been. To think that this was the man that she killed countless women for. Since then, all her love for him instantly turned to hate. And as years went by, her murderous side began to take over her mind. He had to die. Royal Palace, capital of Arcadina. Jeanette Barn walked around the royal garden with her maids while waiting for her father to summon her. She had been waiting for the past 1 hour now, and her father was still in a meeting with the ministers. As she walked further into the garden, she immediately spotted her dear little sister. Carrie Barn was walking toward a large fish pond, a few feet away from her. There were also several knights and even some barons in the gardens. People usually stayed in the royal garden when they were waiting for their turn to see King Barn. "Little sister, you're here too? Let's walk along together, okay?" Speak of the devil. Carrie Barn turned around and saw Jeanette running towards her. Her face immediately scrunched up, and she looked like someone who just ate dog poop. Jeanette sneered as she hurriedly made her way towards Carrie. This little sister of hers already had a bad reputation in the capital, thanks to her. Her White Lotus act had always made everyone side with her, while they in turn despised Carrie. "What do you want?" Carrie asked with a frown on her face. Jeanette stopped in her tracks and immediately started acting as if she was sobbing, while choking on her fake tears. She really looked pitiful. What man wouldn't feel touched while seeing a gentle angel crying? All the knights around the area immediately felt pain seeing her like this. Little sister, how can you talk to me like that? If I did something to anger you, please forgive me. I just want to spend more time with you, little sis. The scene was really heartbreaking. The moronic knights who had seen this immediately looked at Carrie with disapproving gazes while rushing over to Jeanette's side. Princess Carrie, must you be so heartless? Yeah, why must you make her cry? The knights spoke out as they saw their goddess, Princess Jeanette, in tears. They even forgot that they were reprimanding another princess who could order for their deaths. Come on, little sister, you're almost making it too easy for me now. Hey, Jeanette thought. As the men comforted her, Jeanette continued to sob even more loudly. Please, everyone, don't misunderstand my little sister. She was just having a bad day. That's why she talked to me in that manner. She's really a good person and not arrogant and rude like what you all think. All the men looked at Princess Jeanette as if she were some divine being. They all thought that the princess had a heart of gold. To them, Princess Jeanette was pure, saintly, kind, and innocent. She looked like someone whom anyone could easily bully. Little sister, please, don't punish or kill the knights for talking back at you. If you want to hurt someone, hurt me instead. I will willingly offer up my life for any of them. Jeanette said as she fell to her knees. The knights felt touched and started defending the princess even more. Carrie was almost at her boiling point. What did she say that she would kill them? What bullsh***. Jeanette? Offer her life for them. What a joke. She knew that if she made a move against these knights, the entire empire would go in an uproar. She would become the most vicious woman of all time. It's not like she cared or anything, but before her and Eli's plans went through, she couldn't afford to affect his position as the crown prince. For now, most of the citizens wanted Eli to step down from his position as the crown prince. But they were scared to take action. If a large-scale revolt really happened, the citizens would carry fire torches and march up to the palace, demanding for Eli's removal. The capital alone had 37 million people living in it. Sure, there were knights, gangs, and assassins mixed in the group, but the peasants were still quite large in number. No matter what, all the nobles and knights under her and Eli couldn't possibly protect themselves if a large-scale revolt actually happened. Imagine millions of people standing outside the palace walls with torches and other weapons. Even if their father assisted, it still wouldn't count as much. Fortunately for Carrie and Eli, the citizens had not realized the power that they held. What would happen if they decided to team up against them? No one would stand a chance then. For now, they only did small protests in the market areas, but who could really predict the future? These people still feared the nobles, especially King Barn. Their king had killed people when he was displeased, as well as when anyone wanted to go against him. Their king ruled like a tyrant. He was a dictator. The reason why they even had the courage to protest in the marketplaces was because Prince Connor and James promised that they would protect them from King Barn's wrath. King Barn could easily send out his men to make things difficult for them or murder their families. Most of them were just ordinary peasants who had never fought a day in their lives. But since Connor and James were their king's sons, the gullible citizens easily believed them. They wholeheartedly entrusted their safeties to them and started protesting against Eli's position. Because of Connor and James' heroic acts, the people were even more convinced with their choice and actions. Previously, they liked Eli, as he always seemed sweet and kind, and he also looked somewhat innocent. But lately, they had been hearing all sorts of rumors about him. It was said that he enjoyed killing and raping women during his free time. Apparently, Eli had murdered multiple women after he was done sleeping with them. It was also said that he had always been jealous of his brothers and had tried to assassinate them several times. Obviously, these rumors were spread by Connor and James, but the people were like sheep. They just followed a shepherd. Once something had circulated for a while, it would become a fact in their hearts. They truly believed these rumors because Eli had never bothered to prove his innocence. So it must definitely be true. And to top it all off, Carrie, as the most vicious woman in the empire, was Eli's sister. The people now believed that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. How could such a cruel man be their king? Carrie looked at her white lotus sister coldly. What AB asterisk asterisk CH? And just before she was about to defend herself, a guard came over informing Jeanette that their father wanted to see her. Jeanette hurriedly left, giving Carrie no time to make an explanation. As Carrie watched her white lotus sister leave, she knew that what had happened here would definitely spread throughout the entire capital. I'll get you back for this slut. Just you wait. Jeanette walked into the large throne room and immediately spotted Captain Anthony Martinez standing in front of her father. As she looked at him, her heart couldn't help but shiver. 8 months ago, she had come across Anthony's stunning sword skills in the annual nightly tournament. He was so handsome, strong, and had a heroic charm about him. What a dangerous man. Just looking at him, she was sure that he had successfully impregnated her eyes. Wasn't it a crime for someone to look that good? Anthony was the son of Minister Golan Martinez, so she knew that marrying him wouldn't be a problem. Since he was a noble, hence she schemed her way into his life and into his heart. 4 months ago, they had officially started dating, and today her father had called them over to announce that they would be officially engaged, and their wedding would take place before the end of the year. Although she hadn't known him for a long time, Jeanette was sure that he was the one. That's why she had begged and pleaded with her father to rush along the marriage. She was 19 years old, and in this era, people married about this age. They would get engaged at 10 or 11 and get married at 17 or maximum 23. Above 23, you were considered as a problematic woman who no one wanted. Men would be very wary of you and might use you as a side chick. Most women above 23 became desperate and ended up marrying as second wives to elderly rich men. For some reason, her mother had been against all the suitors that previously wanted to be engaged with her. Her mother had said that she would only accept the best of the best for Jeanette. That's why Anthony was the only one that got an approval. He was a noble, young, had outstanding achievements in the army, and was sought after by almost all girls in the capital. After their father had dismissed both of them, she decided to see him off as they walked hand in hand with each other. Are you happy? Note from author San. Thank you all for your love and corrections you have all made so far. Smiling face with hard eyes, smiling face with hard eyes. Thanks to you all, my English had really been picking up. There are so many people who commented, and most of it is love, smiling face with hard eyes, smiling face with hard eyes. From now on, every chapter will have a mini shout-out to the first commenter and the best correction commenter. Thanks, guys, especially Tony Roboski for his comment. I have edited the population of the Empire to be 250,000 people. Thanks, Red Heart. Also a big shout-out to Potato Keeper for being the first person to comment and like the chapter, Red Heart. Now, let's get the show on the road. 2 days had already passed, and the concrete had successfully hardened. Within these 2 days, the men had been installing those iron net prison fences around the site. So far, they had only succeeded in completely fencing the back and the sides of the water and sewage treatment plant. Landon kept the front open so that the trucks could move in and out of the site freely. 9 a.m. Landon had the men remove all the wooden boards, molds, and rails that were previously placed around each would-be building on the construction site. Today, they had to focus on constructing the first floors of every building on the construction site. Landon again demonstrated what they were supposed to do, and once they had grasped the concept, he decided to have them start on their own. He also tasked 500 workers with mixing the cement to form concrete and wheeling them over towards each building on the site. The rest of the 8,000 workers crowded around all the building sites, ready for work. The concrete had hardened and had successfully glued the steel rods firmly to the building floors. And although these steel rods already indicated all corners and rooms on the first floor, it was still important to make sure that the walls were straight and not bent. That's why Landon had the men tie ropes between each rod, so as to accurately form straight lines within the buildings. Landon listened to the workers as they went about trying to outline the buildings. The rope is slanted. I think we should connect these two rods. I don't think that we need to tie the rope between these two rods. It should be between the other two. Ah, you're right. The floor plan given by His Highness shows that this space between the rods is a door. We need to tie the ropes only between the rods that would be turned into walls. What about the parts where His Highness wrote hallway? I remember that His Highness said that the hallway is also like a passageway or corridor. That's true. I remember that I wrote it down on my notes. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, thanks. To think that I actually forgot about it. I need to go home and revise more on it. Thank you for explaining these things to me. I just got here 4 days ago. So I have no idea what most of this stuff means. But now I believe that I have a little more understanding towards this. Don't worry. Once you keep working and attending your school lectures, you too will get it. It's actually not that hard. The men continued to chat and learn from each other as the work progressed on. When they were done, it was finally time to start creating the interior and exterior walls. The men used those ropes as their rulers and started stacking up the cement blocks. The men laid out the concrete on the floors along the ropes and placed the cement blocks on the concrete. Just like that, they kept stacking up the blocks on one another with the use of concrete. Landon thought that the men looked extremely funny. Imagine a long line of people waiting to have access into a club. That's how they looked as they worked around and inside each building. They were packed like tiny sardines as they went about their work. Each person just had 1 foot of working space in front of them. Most plants back on Earth, for example power plants, provided energy for an entire province or at least 3 or 4 cities at once. Hence their sizes were bigger. For example, the Palo Verde plant in Arizona, USA, provided energy to Los Angeles, San Diego, Tucson, and many more California metropolitan areas. The same could be said for 80% of industrial plants back on Earth. For Landon's case, he was just providing for Baymard alone. That's why Baymard's industrial plants didn't need to be so massive. Hence, although he made 500 men mix the concrete, he still felt like 8,000 workers were really a lot for a normal-sized plant. Once the men had stacked up to 1 meter high, the men used the iron bridge ladders to continue on. The first floor was going to be a high-ceiling floor, so Landon needed it to reach at least 3 meters tall. The iron bridge ladders could hold up to 3 people at once, and resembled those ladders that window cleaners used back on Earth. Landon then divided the men into groups of 6. 3 people would stand on the ladders, while the other 3 would be on the ground. 2 out of the 3 men on the ground would aid in giving those on the ladders cement blocks and buckets filled with concrete, while the third person would keep an eye on the ladder footing so as to ensure the safety of those on top. Again, 2 out of 3 workers on the ladders would continue stacking the walls, while the other one be in charge of collecting the buckets of cement and blocks from those on the ground. The work went steady, and by closing time, the first floor of 75% of the buildings had been successfully done. Now, they had to wait for 2 days again for the concrete to completely harden before they could successfully form the second floors. Of course, for the next 2 days, once the men completed the first floor of the buildings left, Landon had them start constructing the first floor walls for the other 2 sites. Honestly, Landon was getting ticked off with this damn cement hardening stuff. Like, why couldn't it just dry down after several hours? Why wait for days? He needed this industries built fast. Chop, chop. Time was money. But since he was doing all the plant sites at once, his irritation about the matter lessened. And just like that, Landon spent most of his days with the construction team. Empire of Arcadina, secret hideout. William wore his boots, tied his hair, and placed his sword in his sheath. Mona rushed up to him and gently held his checks with her palms as she fought back the urge to cry. Her son was a man now, so it was really inappropriate for her to always cry or hold him back. He had responsibilities and a duty to fulfill. Little William, make sure to stay safe. And if you are ever trapped or discovered, make a run for it and don't try to be heroic. Heroes usually die faster. Odin walked up behind Mona and placed his right hand on William's shoulder. It's been almost 2 months now, and that Slytherin bastard should be making his way over to Sangria City. And in another 3 weeks, he should be arriving. You need to make sure that you get to Sangria before he does. Once you successfully get through the city undetected, Captain Remlock would be waiting for you at the Quincy Inn. And like your mother said, If anything goes wrong, Ron, your mother and I can live our lives without having to fulfill our desire for revenge. But without you, there would be no point living for us to live on. Be safe. Dad, Mom, aren't I the ghostly prince? Since when did I ever lose to anyone? Rest assured, I will return back to you all safe. And besides, I'm no hero. The soldiers were sleeping and snoring peacefully within their sleeping units. Every military dormitory had 4 long vertical stacks of straw, 2 on the left side of the room and 2 on the right side of the room. There were also several iron lockers that were placed all around each wall in the room. The lockers resembled the gym lockers back on Earth, but each locker was 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide. All of the lockers had locks on them and also had number tags placed on them. The center of the rooms were kept straw-free, creating a large corridor space for morning roll call. The stacks of straw on each side were separated by a 2-meter gap, leaving the center space to 4 meters wide. Some rooms had less stacks, while others had more. It basically depended on the dimensions of the rooms. In this era, most peasants slept on straws, grass, leaves, and other plants that were deemed comfortable. Previously, Landon had wanted to place the straws and fabrics to make mattresses. But the men complained that loose heaps were more comfortable to sleep on compared to compact ones. When straws were forced and pressed into clothes, they ended up poking people when they slept. Some of the straws might even poke out of the fabric, giving the straw mattresses a spike-like feeling to them. Hence, Landon placed long vertical stacks of straw in every room. The straw was changed every 3 weeks by all the soldiers in each room, as per the room roster. In future, there would be bunk beds for them. But for now, the straw was their best alternative. After all, that was what they were used to anyway. And as for the blankets, each soldier had a 2-meter piece of cloth to cover themselves up at night. For now, there were no pillows since the men preferred so sleep without stone pillows. And Landon didn't blame them. Who would want to sleep on rocks or pebbles? In this era, if peasants were really keen on pillows, they would place several pebbles and dried seaweeds into a piece of fabric and call it a pillow. More like a torturing device. Would that give you serious neck injuries? Anyway, each room had a minimum of 30 soldiers residing in them. Since no one was in the rank of drill sergeant, Landon had the warrant officers look after the new recruits. Drill sergeants were those ranked in the enlisted ranks between sergeants and master sergeants. Everyone in the military fort was either overqualified, warrant soldiers and above, or underqualified, new recruits. That's why the warrant soldiers were the best options for now. Each room had a warrant officer that would be in charge of waking up the new recruits and supervising their morning training. It was 6 a.m. In Kirsten's room, there were 40 soldiers sound asleep as they waited for a new day to begin. Each vertical stack had 10 soldiers on them. Fire up, the whistleblower. Get up, get up, get up, get up. You all have 5 minutes to be fully dressed and assembled at the center of the rooms. Warrant Officer Justin yelled out. Kirsten immediately jumped up and rushed towards his locker. Kirsten had just arrived this July and was still not used to all the new routines that were done in Baymard. He had always wanted to be a knight growing up, and when he was 7, he started training as a page in his hometown. By the age of 13, his town was attacked by a fierce blood gang, and his grandparents died while protecting him and his sister. His grandparents and all the other adults tried to stall the gang, while his sister, and all the other children and some adults fled for their lives. His mother died during childbirth, and his father died while he was out hunting in the forest. All he had were his sister and his grandparents. But when he fled with his 6-year-old sister at the time, he knew that he would never see his grandparents again. He had lived the next 3 years of his life begging, doing petty thievery to feed his little sister, and working as a loader in a shipping dock in Fringa City, within the empire of Terry-K. It was there that fate finally decided to smile on him. While he was loading items onto a ship, he had overheard a man, presumably the owner of the ship, ask about where he could get refugees and buy slaves within the city. Several days later, the man brought a lot of people by the dock and started reassuring them that where they were going would be a happy place with equal pay and good times. Although he was intrigued, he still felt that it was a scam. Ever since he had fled with his sister, people had bullied him and treated him like a piece of horse sh***. He would get beaten up by the sailors on board most of the ships while he was loading items, or even have dirty moped water thrown on his face when his colleagues were having a bad day. He had persevered through all the torture because of his sister. She was all he had, and he would at least try to make her life as comfortable as possible. But now, he had heard that there was such a place that would treat him with respect, and apparently even catered to the poor. Bullsh***. Wasn't this just a typical slavery scam? But then again, something in his heart kept saying, what if? What if what the man said was true? What if he could really become a knight and earn enough money for his sister and him? And even if it was a scam, was he not already treated like shit where he was? Although it was risky, he finally gathered enough courage and begged the man to add him and his little sister to the list. And the rest was history. Once he arrived, he immediately noticed that this city in particular had soldiers and not knights. As he was already 16, he immediately volunteered for the army, since that had always been a lifelong dream of his. Within these 2 weeks, he had also realized that everything that His Highness Landon promised them was true. He made new friends, attended lectures, had enough food to eat, and passed his days in peace. His sister was also happy with her life, and lived in the estate with all the other slaves and refugees. Since he was in the army and couldn't live in the refugee/slave estate, his 9-year-old sister had to live with one other child and one caretaker in a single large room. So she was fine and well taken care of daily. Plus, during his free time, he would make stops to her estate to check up on her regularly. He loved his time here in Baymard, especially the army experience. TSK. To think that he actually hesitated on giving up this golden opportunity. He also made up his mind that he would never betray Baymard, because they had given back his dignity as a man back, taken care of his only sister, and fulfilled his dream to be a knight. Or should he say soldier? Plus, he had already made an oath and signed documents of confidentiality and loyalty towards Baymard. Time's up. Everybody lined up in straight vertical lines at the center of the room. Some of the men had only one leg of boots on, while others didn't even have their shirts on, just their pants. Over the past 2 weeks, the new recruits had learned that if anyone was even a second late to line up, the entire group would face punishment. For example, if someone from the left corner of the room lined up late, all those who slept in that corner would have to do push-ups and frog jumps as punishment. Landon did this to encourage teamwork. If you get up and see the person next to you sleeping, wake their ass up. No one can win a fight or a battle alone. After all, the slogan of the fort is all for one, one for all. What did I tell you all about looking forward? Keep your head straight. Karsten's heart started beating faster. He knew that he had F*** kept up today. Warrant Officer Justin came so close to him that if someone accidentally pushed him forward, they would definitely kiss each other. But he couldn't be fooled. He had been here long enough to know that when the warrant officers got close to anyone like this, it was nothing good to write about. sh***, he thought. Private, where's your shirt? Do you think that you look sexy? Do you want us to admire you? Is that it? No, sir. Then why is your shirt not on your body? Kirsten felt like crying. Why did he lock his locker last night? He usually kept it open, so as not to slow down his pace in the mornings. Luckily, Warrant Officer Justin quickly left him and picked on the guy who had only his left boot on. 2 minutes of Warrant Officer Justin's yells passed, and it was now 6:10 a.m. Everyone, it's time to head on out. By 6:20, you should all be in the fields. Those who aren't fully dressed should get dressed and meet us on the field. From there, you will receive your punishments. Now, everybody else, move out. Kirsten's heart sank even further. Damn, his forgetfulness. He had been doing good since he got here. And now, this one slip-up caused him punishment. He truly felt like crying, but he also knew that there was nothing he could do about it. It was indeed his slip-up, and he had to take full responsibility for his actions. As everyone else left, Kirsten wore his shirt and dashed out like lightning towards a field. He quickly arrived a few seconds before go time and stood in line. Safe, he thought. All the recruits trained together, hence all the warrant officers in charge of them were on the field too. Everybody dropped down and give me 20. Kirsten immediately dropped down and started doing his push-ups. As he continued on, another warrant officer came over and inspected his form. "Arms apart, Private. You will not get results by doing it that way." He immediately adjusted his stance and persisted on. "Listen up. It's time to begin the jog. You will all follow the person in front of you. You will all keep up and not slack off. Now everyone begin the jog." Kirsten followed the recruit in front of him and jogged around the field 6 times. As they jogged, they also sang number songs that surprisingly keep them motivated. Plus, it was kind of like they were doing math at the same time. Although they didn't know intense math, they had all dealt with money before, so it wasn't that hard to count. 3 silver coins plus 10 silver coins gave 13 silver coins. 2, 1, 2, 3, 10. 1, 2, 3, 11. 1, 2, 3, 12. That kept them moving forward, and they finally ended up jogging back to their original positions. From there, they did pull-ups, sit-ups, leg lounges, high kicks, squats, frog walks, and finally frog jumps. By 7:30 a.m., they were done. Of course, those who previously didn't completely dress up or came late to the general assembly on the fields or in their dormitories stayed back to receive their punishments. Kirsten ran another 2 runs round around the field and did 10 more push-ups. No slacking off, Private. Keep up. He was worn out as hell. The pain he felt throughout his body was really exhausting. He swore to never do the same mistake he did again. Never. By 7:50 a.m., he was done and quickly dashed away to get his bath. Bath time was from 7:40 to 8:20 a.m., so he was already 10 minutes late. He quickly freshened up and still came 5 minutes late for breakfast. Breakfast was also from 8:30 to 9:10 a.m., while classes started at 9:30 a.m. He first attended his military lectures on strategies, cannon operations, and safety measures, as well as a device called a gun. And after his 12:30 lunch, he made his way at 1:20 p.m. to the Baymard Public School. Today he just had Math 1 and Pino 1 in his schedule, while tomorrow he had only Math 2. At 3:50, he was back to the military fort and had 1 hour and 10 minutes to rest before going for his gun-firing session. In May, Landon had asked him to create the semi-automatic pistols for the military. And in June, only the warrant officers, the captains, major generals, and of course Lucius practiced with them. Now that the older soldiers understood how to use them, this July, Landon had the officers train and teach these new recruits how to fire the weapons. Of course, Landon labeled the guns as well. This first gun was called a Baymard M.A1. In Kirsten's schedule, he had gun firing practice on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as well as his obstacle courses. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he also had classes, sword fighting sessions, and close combat sessions. On Saturdays, he only had rock climbing lessons in the lower region, while on Sundays, he had nothing at all and was basically free as a bird. Of course, every day, he would have morning training routines with the warrant officers, just as he did today. He rested, chatted with his friends, and when it was 5 p.m., he got to the field and held his gun, like he had been doing for the past few days. So far, no one was allowed to keep the guns. After training, all the guns were counted, collected, and stored back in the fort. Aim for the eyes. Go. Kirsten looked at the large pieces of paper 50 feet away and fired his shots. The paper had an outline of a man drawn on it. There were also several marked lines within the image. Their task was to aim for the inner outline on the man drawn on the paper. Pow! 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 When all the recruits had finished shooting, they unarmed themselves by placing the guns on the ground. Only then did the warrant officers on duty reach forward towards their shot papers. Kirsten looked at his large sheet of paper and was disappointed in himself. Although he got the man's nipples, he was still far away from the man's head. They did several other shots, and by 6:20 p.m., they were done. Wah! You're so lucky. At least you got the nipples. I got the man's belly. Damn! I got his right arm. Would that really do any damage? Sigh. I got his junk. I think the man must be in serious pain. Ha ha! They all laughed out as they made their way to their 6:30 class. Next up, obstacle courses. Kirsten and his friends ran and jumped on thin logs of wood that were surrounded by mud. The logs were inclined upwards and attached to an even larger logs of wood. Kirsten jumped on a log and nearly slipped. Crap! He steadied himself and continued forward on the inclined logs, and finally arrived on several larger logs of wood suspended 2 meters in the air by iron bars. As he was about to move, the person in front of him slipped and fell into the mud. Plop! A warrant officer quickly told the recruit, who fell, to go back at the end of the line and start all over again. Kirsten focused, passed through several log bridges, and arrived back at ground level. He quickly crawled through several large pipes and made his way to another set of inclined logs suspended 3 meters high, which led to a tall wooden post. Once at the top, he quickly used the ropes on the sides to slide down. Once on ground level, he quickly ran towards another 3-meter-tall iron bar wall, which looked like the doors of a giant medieval prison cell. He put his legs and hands in the holes on the wall and climbed over the wall, making his way over the fall wall. As he progressed, he became more fatigued and stressed. He crawled in sand under several wooden logs, jumped through tires, and almost fell into mud several times. He was now at the final stage of the obstacle course. He crawled on ropes, trying to get from one wooden post to another, and when he reached the end, he let go of the rope and lost his footing. Plop! Get to the back of the line and start over again. Kirsten wanted to cry. Why did I suddenly lose my footing? I'm now covered in mud. My hands and shoes are all slippery. There's no way that I wouldn't fall back again. He really cursed his luck. By 7:20 p.m., the session was over, and he quickly headed with his friends to take his bath. I saw your fall, man. Truly tragic. Don't mock me, all right. By 8:30, everyone had dinner. And by 9:30 p.m., he went around the fort with his friends while talking about their day. And by 11 p.m., it was lights out, time to sleep. He was really exhausted, but at the same time happy. He only hoped that tomorrow would be just as exciting as today was. This was his experience. It had been 2 weeks now, and Landon had been aiding the construction workers at the sites. Today, Landon left the workers early because he had a meeting to attend. At 3 p.m., Landon headed over to the alchemy industry to have his weekly meetings with all the supervisors and overseers. Every week, Landon would use any room in any of the industries for the meetings. He would rotate between all industries so as to be fair. Last week, the meeting took place at the food industry. The week before that, it was held at the construction industry. And now, it was at the alchemy industry. All the overseers and supervisors were supposed to bring in their weekly reports indicating their progress compared to the prior week, and a pie chart which showed their results, as well as how many products were currently in stock. They were also supposed to present all the problems and difficulties the workers faced within each industry. So far, Baymard had several sections within each industry. Food industry. Black small square department F1, actual farming. Black small square dep F2, storage and distribution. Black small square dep F3, seasoning and spice making. Black small square dep F4, cooking oil. Black small square dep F5, vinegar. Black small square dep F6, butter. Black small square dep F7, taking care of goats, chickens, etc. Alchemy/chemistry industry. Black small square dep A1, gunpowder. Black small square dep A2, paint. Black small square dep A3, chalk making. Black small square dep A4, chemical products like chlorine, etc. Black small square dep A5, storage and distribution of goods. Black small square dep A6, oil production. Black small square dep A7, ink making. Black small square dep A8, soap making. Construction industry. Black small square dep C1, mining. Black small square dep C2, glass making. Black small square dep C3, warfare weapons, guns, cannons. Black small square dep C4, storage and distribution of goods. Black small square dep C5, everything rubber. Black small square dep C6, in charge of building and fixing all construction equipment, creating electrical gadgets and heavy industrial machines, as well as other building fixtures. Black small square dep C7, cement making. Black small square dep C8, wood cutting. Black small square dep C9, everything plastic. Black small square dep C10, pipe making. Black small square dep C11, paper making. Black small square dep C12, everything porcelain and marble. Black small square depth C13. Furniture making like bed frames. Black small square depth C14. Construction workers. The room was set up like a lecture hall, with all the supervisors and overseers facing a podium at the front. Everyone quieted down, and the meeting began. Chief Wiggins, since we are at your industry this time, we will start with you. The floor is yours. Chief Wiggins and the 16 supervisors within his industry came forward with samples of all the products created within the week, excluding chemicals, guns, and gunpowder, of course. For today, everything else basically looks and has the same texture and results as last week's products. All except the soap. Landon and everyone else nodded as they listened to Chief Wiggins. Last week, the soap was still effective, but it really didn't lather up as much as Landon expected. Apparently, they didn't add enough sodium lauryl sulfate into their products. But this week, it looked like they had successfully done the corrections and came prepared. As Wiggins spoke, the supervisors placed several bowls of water on 3 large tables. I would like everyone to come up and wash their hands in these separate bowls of water using the soaps. Those seated rushed to the tables and started washing their hands. There were different color bars of soap placed by the side of each basin. Wow, this is what His Highness meant by lathering up? I have to agree, it makes me feel like my hands are really dirt-free. Each bar even has a name and number carved on it. Ah, it smells like lavender. My wife would surely like this one. Mine smells very manly. Can it be used for doing laundry and bathing? Of course. That's what Chief Wiggins said in his last week report. I think the B3 soap is the one used for doing laundry. It really is an improvement compared to last week's soaps. Once everyone sat down, Chief Wiggins continued his presentation. As he spoke, the supervisors got all the bowls of water and threw them outside the windows. They also gathered up all the soap bars and cleaned the tables with rags. Chief Wiggins spoke about the overall success rate within his industry, as well as the few issues and problems encountered within the manufacturing processes. Later on, the supervisors spoke about the issues all the workers faced at work. At the end of their presentation, everyone rose up and clapped for them. Brilliant! They had really tried their best compared to last week. Those from the alchemy industry all blushed and smiled as they saw the positive response from everyone. And to top it off, His Highness rose up too. Last week, His Highness didn't rise up but still clapped for them. This week, they saw him standing, smiling, clapping, and even nodding several times to them. All their hard work had paid off. Now it was time for the construction industry to take over the presentation. All the products were same compared to last week, except the new tables, porcelain plates, marble cups, pens, pencils, plastic rulers, and paper. Wow, I didn't know that paper could be colored blue. Overseer Tim really outdid himself this time. Check out this pen. The ones before had clear casings, but this one has a grayish casing and looks very cool. Look, when I press on the top, the pen head shoots out at the bottom. This is the best invention so far. What do you know? Can't you see that slick glass table over there? The table legs are made out of wood, but the top part is made of glass. Glass! Do you think that a pen can compare to that? I agree. The table is the best. I can't wait for these products to be sold in the stores. They won't be sold now. His Highness said that once house construction starts, then they would be sold. So for now, they can only be stored in big warehouses. But did you see that porcelain plate? It's so artistic and funny. It says, "Go away. Opening hours are closed." Ha ha. I need that plate in my life. That should be my new slogan. Every time someone wants to talk to me when I'm eating, I'll just tell them, "Go away. Opening hours are closed." The construction industry rounded up, and it was finally time for the food industry to shine. Once Tim was done, Overseer Lior from the food industry came over with bread and other foods so that his audience could feel the effectiveness of his spices, seasonings, butter, and so on. Of course, everyone fell in love with them. But just looking at the dried spices and seasonings made their tongues salivate. The men sprinkled the different seasonings and spices on their meat and felt like they were in heaven. The juiciness, the tenderness. How could food taste so good? The meat was well cooked. It had an earthy color and a stringy feel to it. As they savored the meat, they began to eat like pigs without even knowing it. Some of the meat was also deep-fried and had a crisp feel to them. They were either sprinkled with salt and pepper or garlic. The single men only had one thought right now. Who cooked this meat? Can they marry them? They had to admit the spiciness and seasonings had improved compared to last week's results. They were still eating the horse meat from the previous attack on Baymard. And it was at this time that they truly felt grateful to their enemies. They sincerely thanked their enemies for dropping them several stacks of meat in Baymard. Once the chicken was done, they started licking their fingers. Delicious! There were also several fried rice and vegetable dishes that were done with oil, powdered ginger, garlic, and vinegar. The butter, on the other hand, was a real treat. The rich, soft feel of the butter on the bread made them feel like they were floating on clouds. The food industry had produced two types of butter, salted and non-salted. Was this how food was supposed to taste? They couldn't help but feel that they had been eating dog *** all through their lives. They began to wonder how they had ever coped all through the years. How could they go back to eating those awful dishes? No way. They'd rather starve. Right now, their taste buds had been upgraded, and they'd already started forgetting what the good they used to cook tasted like. Since they discovered that food was supposed to taste like this, most of the men had gone to the market to buy the products that were supplied by the food company to these stores. These products were now seen as essentials in their homes. Chief Wiggins and Tim were seriously having multiple food orgasms in their mouths. It was truly mouth-watering. They couldn't help but give 2 thumbs up to Overseer Lior. On the other hand, Overseer Lior, who was being praised, kept thinking about what kind of food house he should build in future. With these new delicacies, wasn't his world not complete? Hell yeah. It was more than complete. For now, he decided to put a stop to his food house construction. What if His Highness made more food stuff? This situation was indeed tricky. Landon, who was oblivious to Overseer Lior's food madness, continued tasting all the different dishes placed in front of him. Overall, Landon was utterly impressed as well. All the industries had heeded to his advice and really improved their products compared to last week. Once all the presentations were done, they started discussing all the issues within their industries and how to further improve their results. Your Highness, now that we have pens, what do we do with the excess chalk in stock? A supervisor asked. Landon thought for a while. Chalk itself has several uses. It was good for raising soil acidity, hence increasing the agricultural yield of the farms. There were several types of chalks like calcium carbonate, magnesium calcium, and so on. In addition, it aids in removing perspiration and reduces slipping. Hence, it was already used by the military for weightlifting, tug-of-war, rock climbing, and other gymnastics. Chalk was also used in house construction and served as mild abrasives for several other industries, like toothpaste. That's why it was very important for them to continue producing chalk. For now, still produce the same amount of chalk powder, but limit the amount that is molded into chalk sticks. Landon replied. All the men, irrespective of which department or industry they were from, asked Landon multiple questions. And when Landon answered them, they would immediately jotted down everything, so as not to forget Landon's instructions. After all, next week, they were to show how they implemented His Highness's instructions and advice to their industries. No one wanted to let Landon down. Once Landon was done with the group, he headed towards the estate, which was presently known as the hospital. Today, he had a meeting with all the doctors and some nurses there. Not all the nurses could come as they couldn't close down the hospital, school, military, and industry clinics for the meeting. Today, Landon just wanted to know the results about his sanitation advice, and first aid methods were working on the patients. Landon had been teaching them basic first aid since May. With the help of hydrogen peroxide, wounds were cleaned up properly. The first time hydrogen peroxide was used, the doctors, nurse, and even the patient were shocked. How come the injured area was foaming up, yet it didn't hurt at all? And how can the dried blood on the wound come out with just a few swipes with a clean cloth? Anyway, they were thoroughly impressed with the hydrogen peroxide. The medicated alcohol, on the other hand, had the patients screaming out loud. Although they hated it, they knew that alcohol was normally needed in treating wounds. Landon also taught them the importance of using aloe vera as an anesthetic after treating the wounds. With the help of the thin medical rubber gloves and other hospital wear, the doctors and nurses worked properly without spreading blood here and there, or further contaminating the patients. Soap was also used to clean the floors and other surfaces within the hospital, leaving the air with a fresh, clean smell. When Landon got to the hospital, he was somewhat shocked at the alarming situation in there. Well, it was alarming to him anyway. He had forgotten that children could still have such illnesses. Your Highness, this week, we have admitted over 100 children in the hospital. They were all infected with the scourge creeper, chickenpox. While Landon was busy dealing with the sick, Slytherin Cord had made his way to the city of Sangria. Finally, he was going to catch that bastard, who called himself the Ghostly Prince. It was finally time. Two groups of men faced each other as they prepared for battle. Slytherin was really pissed off now. After all his planning, traveling, and scheming, he still ended up in this bastard's trap. Wasn't this the greatest disgrace to his name? It was all this bastard's fault. Why couldn't he just die? Damn. William had entered the room with 10 men, so Slytherin thought that this was all the people he had. Slytherin's reports stated that William usually came here with 15 people, and since they had taken care of the 5 guards so far, so Slytherin thought it was logical for William to only have 10 men right now. So either way, Slytherin still had his victory smile on. So what if I'm looking for you? Even if you succeeded in trapping me and men here, do you really think that you are enough to stop me? HMMP. Enough chit-chat. Hand over your life, and I might just let you go. Slytherin said coldly. William smiled. Silly me. Did you think that these were all my men? Immediately 5 more came out. Just where did those men come from? Slytherin couldn't help but wonder. Right now, it was 15 men to 15 men, excluding him and the bastard. So now, the battle was even. But so what? He was still going to kill the weasel. Like I said, hand over your life, and I might spare you, Slytherin repeated again coldly. Everyone on William's side was utterly confused with what Slytherin had said. Hand over your life? Aren't you the one who is trapped now? Just where did you get your confidence from? William looked at the delusional Slytherin and knew that this man was conceited. It was clear that Slytherin had always thought that he was far better than everyone else. Confidence was a good thing, but it could sometimes lead one to underestimate their enemies. Right now, William's 50 hidden knights had taken care of Slytherin's subordinates that were supposed to surround the perimeter. William didn't want to use his hidden guards to fight with Slytherin, so he used the other men who usually followed him during the daytime to fight this battle. You're right, let's cut the bullsh asterisk and get down to business, shall we? Immediately, William swung his sharp iron sword at the men who were acting as shields. Slytherin's men had formed a circle around him in an attempt to shield him from the enemy. The battle had finally begun. Clink! The enemy blocked William's attack. As his veins bulged through his arms, William swung his sword again and ended his attack with a kick on his enemy's chest. Their formation was broken. The enemy quickly got up from the ground and yelled angrily, Bastard! Die! The enemy swung his sword horizontally at full swing as he aimed for William's neck. William immediately fell backwards towards the ground as a way of ducking. He quickly used his back and hands to kick off from the ground and use his legs to punch the chin and face of his enemy. Ah, the enemy cried. Blood was oozing out of his enemy's nostrils. Once he was up from the ground, he swung his sword with all his might and instantly cut his enemy's head off cleanly. Phew! The head rolled on the floor as blood oozed out through the dead man's neck. The body shook like a chicken whose head had been cut off. Just as William was about to look at the situation in the room, another enemy approached him. Clink! As the battle in the room went on, Slytherin's eyes opened wide as 3 of his men dropped to the floor like flies, while his enemy's side didn't even loose a single man. Why did it turn out like this? At this point, he had to look for a way to escape. He looked around the room, and when he saw a window at the corner, his eyes lit up. William's men fought and kept pushing on as they tried to get to Slytherin, who was now making his escape through the window. Slytherin quickly smashed the wooden window frames and jumped out. He quickly escaped with 4 of his men, as he passed through the bushes in the cemetery. William, who had seen Slytherin escape, told 4 of his men to follow them. As Slytherin ran, he was shocked to see William's men on his tail. "Damn, boss, I'll hold them off." With that, 2 of his subordinates stopped and drew their sword from the sheath that was strapped behind their backs. They steadied themselves in preparation for the fight. Clink, clink, clink. As Slytherin ran, he kept hearing the sounds of swords hitting one another. He knew that his men would definitely die tonight. It was not that Slytherin cared for their lives or had any deep affection for them. It was just that training new staff or knights would take years to do and was already a hassle to him. Why would he feel bad if they died for him? Wasn't he their boss? Weren't they supposed to fight for him? Men like him only really cared about raising their armies and conquering new territories, people, or objects. Death was an everyday occurrence here, so why would Slytherin feel bad? It was his men's duty to die for him, and they had successfully fulfilled it. What more could he say? Once they were closer to their horses, the other 2 men who were left with Slytherin stayed behind in order to stall the enemies from getting to Slytherin. Slytherin quickly got on his horse and made his way towards the gates of Sangria. He needed to leave quickly with the rest of his men, who were already waiting for him outside the gates. As he left, he couldn't help but curse that bastard ghostly prince. He swore that he would eat the bastard's flesh and drink his blood when he succeeded. William stood in the cemetery as he faced all 66 of his men who were standing by his side and waiting for the rest to arrive. Right now, they were waiting for the 4 who were sent to deal with Slytherin's fleeing group. For tonight's show, William had come here with 70 men. He had kept 50 men as secret guards around the cemetery, 10 guarding the base, and 10 around him. The first 2 men guarding the base weren't injured by Slytherin's men, as the hidden guards easily took care of the enemies once Slytherin successfully went into the base. It was only the 3 men guarding the large wooden door that got injured. Some were stabbed on their backs, and others in their bellies. But so far no one had died. Once the 4 men were back, they gave their report to William. "My lord, we have completed the mission," they said as they knelt down in front of him. "Is Slytherin Cord dead?" "No, my lord." "What about his men who were fleeing with him?" "All dead, my lord." "And his men outside the gates?" "All dead, my lord." "Good." Actually, William's plan was never kill Slytherin. Slytherin was a key chess piece in Eli's rise to power. With Slytherin's help, Eli could easily take care of his siblings. William didn't want to start attacking any of them until a winner emerged from the group. Why go through all that stress when he could just kill the winner? William was clear on his thoughts. If the winner didn't step down from the throne, then the winner had to die. Simple. Slytherin was part of Eli's backbone, and it wasn't necessary to have him killed just yet. He did all this just to send a message to his little cousin Eli and Slytherin. William had left a message in Slytherin's hideout outside the city gates. He was sure that right about now, Slytherin should have gotten the message. And he was right. Slytherin reached his hideout and was shocked silly. His men were all dead, and all their horses had magically disappeared. The funny part was that all their belongings and clothes had been stolen. There were just naked dead bodies lying around. He quickly rushed towards his room and pushed the door wide open. Everything was gone. All his gold, his silver, and a few documents that he had within his care were gone. They were really gone with the wind. Luckily, Slytherin had always kept his most important documents with him. He couldn't imagine what would happen if his enemies had gotten them. He had to admit that he had really underestimated that bastard. This was the last time that he would ever make that mistake again. There was a note on his table with a knife stabbed on it. The knife had a unique craftsmanship and had the initials G.P on its handle. Slytherin immediately knew who the culprit was. As he read the letter, his blood boiled, and he couldn't help but crumble the letter in his hands. He swore that he would for sure kill the bastard, even if he had to die trying. The bastard had to die. After reading the letter, Slytherin placed it in his pocket and went outside his room. He quickly burnt down the base and took off. He had come to Sangria with 150 men, excluding the 50 that usually stayed in Sangria to keep an eye on things. All 200 men had died, with only him being the sole survivor. "The humiliation you have given me today, I will remember it." Baymart, while Slytherin was steaming away like a glazed donut, Landon had been educating the doctors, nurses, and caretakers on how to handle chickenpox patients. The children were all infected with this scourge creeper, chickenpox. Since this time was school break, the children would run around the estate playing with each other all day long. Apparently, one of the children had it, but it wasn't really visible at the time. It just looked like breakouts or bad allergies, so no one thought anything of it. Then that child spread it to the other children who had never had chickenpox before in the estate. Since chickenpox is an airborne disease, all those children were easily infected. It was only a few days ago that the head doctor in the clinic realized what it was. In this world, since they didn't have any cure for chickenpox, all they did was let the virus go away on its own, while isolating the victims and treating them like leprosy patients. Landon walked into the room and saw the children itching and scratching themselves aggressively. That was the worst thing to do in such situations. Woo-woo, it's itchy. Will I remain like this forever? I feel like my throat is dry. Landon came into the room and ensured the patients that they would be fine. It wasn't easy. Some children were crying and screaming in the room, while others were violently scratching themselves against the walls. Finally, Landon decided to quiet them down with a short story. And after the story, he began briefing all the doctors on what the disease actually was and how they could further treat and cure it. He also wanted the doctors educate the citizens and the caretakers, ensuring them that this illness was literally not a big deal. There was no reason to not visit the patients if the citizens had already gotten chickenpox when they were younger. It rarely affected those that had already gotten it. He realized that he also needed the citizens to come to the hospital within this month and register all the symptoms and diseases that they had ever gotten before. Although these illnesses had strange names in this world, they all had common symptoms to those that Landon remembered back on Earth. He wanted to know if they had gotten or survived attacks from diseases like measles, mumps, and so on. He also realized that people in this era could not differentiate between smallpox and chickenpox. For them, both were one and the same. Also, there was presently no cure for most of these diseases. That's why thousands of people died yearly within the Pino continent from them. To think that people could actually die from something like malaria, yellow fever, and typhoid. They also died from measles as well. For chickenpox to be fully cured, Landon gave the doctors a detailed description for the treatment process. The children were to soak in cold water that had sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, added to it. They were to do this at least 2 times a day. After soaking, they were to bathe with soap so as to keep their skin clean. The caretakers and nurses were only supposed to pat and not rub their skin when giving the children their bath. They were also to keep the children hydrated by allowing them to drink lots of water and milk throughout the day. The children needed to fight off their fever and the viruses within their bodies. That's why their bodies needed hydration regularly. Heat and sweat would also make their skin itchy, so the caretakers were to wipe their bodies with wet, cold rags after 3 hours so as to calm their skin. Since there were no pills, Landon decided to go old school. He decided to go towards the direction of Chinese medicine. He had the doctors, nurses, and some caretakers boil the leaves of the Iplomia and Osmium basilium plant. The children were to drink the liquid from the boiled leaves at least 3 times a day. Landon had previously gotten all knowledge in farming. Part of that knowledge included identifying all plants, vegetables, dairy farming, food, and all other types of farming that existed in the world. He knew how to grow a farm filled with medical plants as well. Hence, he could tell how beneficial each plant was to the human body. Landon speculated that within a week and a half, the chickenpox crises should pass for most of the children. Of course, some might require more time to completely get rid of the virus. It's been a few days since the whole chickenpox fiasco. Dr. Jerson looked at the reports from the nurses and nodded. His Highness treatment procedures had worked. When Jerson first came to Baymard, he wasn't really sure about how his life would turn out. He came in May due to the multiple attacks that were taking place in his city at the Empire of Jotun. When he boarded the ship with his family, he kept on praying that Baymard was as good as the ship owner had said. He was scared silly because he didn't want his wife, his children, his brother, and his sister's families to end up as slaves. But when he got here, he knew that all his worries were for nothing. This new king of theirs seemed to know everything. From what he gathered, their king was the one who came up with all the ideas in Baymard. At first he didn't believe it, but when their king started teaching them first aid and the medicinal importance of several plants, he was really taken aback. Their king seemed to be a super genius. He didn't know if he should call the current king of Arcadina foolish or stupid. How could he banish such a treasure? Was he sick in the head? At this point, he had given up on trying to understand royalty. For him, he really enjoyed talking with His Highness. He had observed that Landon didn't put on airs with him and also admitted to his faults when he felt like he was wrong. Like the other day, Landon apologized for not telling them to register everyone's illness earlier on. Although it really wasn't his fault, their king felt solely responsible for the chickenpox incident. This king of theirs was weird, but they liked him. Landon had told them that they should call themselves doctors and not healers or apothecaries. He had to admit that the word doctor had a better ring to it. Doctor. Dr. Jerson. Yup, it was way better than the other names. In this world, nurses were also called helpers, so of course Landon also changed their names to nurses. The hospital nurses always had their hair placed in a bun or tied away with clothing while at work. Both doctors and nurses had to put on their gloves when treating injuries, as well as their clinical rubber shoes. For the doctors and nurses, Landon didn't want to bother the women around Baymard to sew lab coats, so he had given the hospital staff transparent plastic coats for them to wear at work. The coats looked exactly like transparent raincoats and were also the same ones used by the alchemy industry while they were in the labs. The coats had buttons and 2 large pockets at the front waist region. The nurses also had to wear pants while at work. Actually, all the women in the industries also wore pants. How could they work with those long skirts and gowns that kept dragging on the floor and collecting dirt and mud? When the women moved, they usually had to gather up their gowns as they walked. Several of them had fallen down on the first day during their jobs. How could they carry anything and climb the stairs or move at work with what they were wearing? Some women had broken some glass items already. It wasn't a big deal to break these items, but having the workers injure themselves was really frightening. Landon had removed several pieces of glass from their skin and given them first aid multiple times. That's why Landon made the rule way back in May that all women were to wear pants at work. What if they fell onto the broken glass pieces and lost an eye? There's a reason why all industries back on Earth require people to wear pants, and that was mainly for safety reasons. Even women in the hospitals wore pants. Of course, the military women as well wore pants, but for different reasons. Who could complete the obstacle courses or do rock climbing and so on with those ridiculously long gowns or skirts. Plus, Landon was pretty sure that their underwear would show when they were doing all those military stunts. The women also found that they could do their jobs more efficiently in pants compared to skirts. They were also happy that they had stopped breaking things here and there. They were really grateful that His Highness didn't fire them from their jobs. For them, the things they broke were really expensive, but their king didn't pay any mind to it and worried about their safety instead. Hence, pants was the way forward in Baymard. Each doctor and nurse also had a name tag that they had pinned to their uniforms so that all the patients could remember their names. Right now, the caretakers that Landon had assigned around the hospital were looking after the patients, while the only doctor and 2 nurses in the main hospital were having a short but brief meeting. Nurse Chanel had just come for her shift, while Nurse Laura was about to end her own shift. The hospital was open 24 hours, so for sure, Nurse Laura would come again late at night after Chanel closed from work. Landon had told them to persevere till the end of the month, before he would assign more people to work as nurses. By that time, he would task training the new people to the present hospital staff. For now, the hospital was really understaffed. Dr. Jerson, so far we have seen a remarkable improvement with the chickenpox patients. From the tests, in the next few days, 90% of them should be free to leave. Nurse Laura said, as she handed over all patient reports to him. We have also started recording all the citizens' health statuses and diseases that they had gotten before. Nurse Chanel added. Actually, Dr. Jerson was really impressed with Landon's was of thinking. Landon had placed several wooden shelves in one of the largest rooms in the hospital and called it the archives. Each shelf case had a letter carved onto it from I through Z. It was kind of like a filing system. Every citizen's name would be written on the corner and top of the books and placed on the shelves. The doctors and nurses would be the only ones with access to the room, hence only they would get the keys. The books would show the patient's name, place of birth, date of birth, occupation, all visits to the hospital, illnesses, doctor's prescriptions, recommendations, doctor's signature, and so on. The patients were required to buy another hospital book from the hospital. This book was the one that they could take home. This hospital book would also show them the drugs, treatment recommended by the doctor, and what they should do to relieve themselves from their illnesses. This book would also be used anywhere in any clinic within Baymard. After all the hospitals and clinics in Baymard were considered as one. Since there were no computers yet, Landon needed a way to make sure that everyone's information got recorded properly. The patient was supposed to keep the note in his hospital book when he or she gets home, and the doctors in the clinics were tasked with heading over to the main hospital and recording all the information in the patient's book stored in the archives. That way, even if the patient lost the note or his personal hospital book, the doctors can still look up his files from the archives. This was to be done at least until computers got invented, which would be way far ahead. Even in the next few years, Landon was sure that he wouldn't be able to do it. What about Grandma Patricia? Is she getting any better? Dr. Jerson asked. Nurse Chanel took over and presented him Grandma Patricia's hospital book. Dr. Jerson quickly grazed through it and nodded as a sign of agreement to what was written in it. It looks like the swelling on her waist has gone down drastically, so His Highness was right. For now, continue all her treatments as planned. Since she has improved, I will meet His Highness to see if we should adjust anything in her treatment or diet. Grandma Patricia was one of the elderly women who came to Baymard as a refugee in June with her family. She had fallen down while farming and had rolled down a hill that was covered in stones and dirt. Elderly people have soft tissue bones, and any sort of fall could lead them to hospitalization. When she fell, she had fractured her hip bone, which led to the swelling around her waist. Her entire body felt completely alien to her at that point. The pain was truly unbearable. Her family had gotten a healer who had advised them to keep her lying in bed all day long. She had been lying in bed for the past 3 months now. When she wanted to relieve herself or take a bath, her daughter or daughter-in-laws would help her. But that healer's advice was actually a bad move. Since then, walking had been too stressful for her as well. When injured, the elderly needed constant massages and light exercises to strengthen their bones. They needed good physical therapy. A healthy, strong body could better fight off infection and make recovery from injuries way faster than a weak one. Exercising could also delay or even prevent diseases like diabetes, cancer, strokes, and many more, just to name a few. The most important thing was that exercising could definitely improve their quality of life and life expectancy. Just lying on the bed for so long had led her to develop back pains and other body pains. Landon had given them instructions on what her diet should be like and how they were supposed to aid her through her healing process. It had been a month and a few weeks now, and there was already a massive improvement with her body and her attitude towards life. When she arrived, she acted like she wanted to die early. But now, she smiled every day and also spent her time gisting away with the other seniors in the hospital. Her family was so happy seeing her walk that they started crying. They had really thought that she would live the rest of her life laying in bed. What Dr. Jerson really appreciated the most was what His Highness called a medical walker. The walker had 4 legs and was made of iron and had rubber tubes as the shoe of the iron legs. Rubber was also placed around the side handles and acted as a soft cushion between the iron and the palms of the senior citizens. The walker really aided Grandma Patricia when she walked around the hospital during her rehabilitation exercises. As Jerson looked at the report, he couldn't help but smile. Good. You all have done a great job as nurses. Nurse Laura and Chanel were blushing at Jerson's praises as they smiled from ear to ear. They too felt that this is how a hospital should operate. Now let's go do our rounds and see how all the patients are doing. They arrived at a room with a name tag by the side of the room. The name Ward Juan was painted on the name tag and showed that this was the first ward on the ground floor of the hospital. As they walked in, the children were chatting and drawing on their pieces of paper. Some of the children's families who were not scheduled for work were also in the ward visiting their children. Now that they had been better educated and had spent time with their children, they quickly realized that the whole empire had a wrong idea about chickenpox. They even started feeling guilty towards their children for treating them like leprosy patients. Thank the ancestors that their king had been given the wisdom of the heavens to enlighten them. Once they saw the group come in, the children started smiling and waving happily. "Hey, it's Dr. Jerson." "Dr. Jerson, where?" "Nurse Laura, Nurse Chanel." The families of the children come forward to say their thanks. "Doctor, thank you for taking care of my little Bibbless, my wife, and I would like to invite you to our home to convey our thanks." "Nurse Laura, thank you for doing your best. My boy tells me that because of your care, he had started getting better." "Nurse Chanel, my daughter sings your praise daily and says that you have the healing hands from the heavens." "Doctor, Nurse, _" Everyone was happy as they offered their honest gratitude towards the hospital staff. Honestly, the nurses and Dr. Jerson were really happy with the recognition they were getting from the citizens. The nurses almost became emotional, but they knew right now wasn't the time to cry. They had to be strong and keep doing their jobs. For the first time since they started their profession, they felt like they were doing something right. It wasn't all about the money. They quickly realized that saving lives and treating illnesses gave them great joy and a sense of fulfillment. As they checked all the patients, the nurses took down notes of any patient who had developed any other complications or problems with the medicine given to them. Landon had told them to always do this because people could be allergic to certain drugs. Even the water from the boiled leaves could cause allergies or rashes to some people. Once they were done, they visited all the other wards with chickenpox patients and finally headed over to the other patients in the ward. They stepped into Ward G23 and saw some senior citizens and their families who came to visit them. Dr. Jerson. Hey, I was just talking about you. Nurse Laura, welcome." Child Chanel, come over to Granny. The patients welcomed the group and even teased them here and there. "Child Laura, I have a grandson who isn't married. Hee. I think you would be a good match for him. That way I can have you as my granddaughter-in-law. I want Nurse Chanel as my granddaughter-in-law. Do you know, I heard that Dr. Jerson's wife is as beautiful as a flower. Of course she is beautiful. Do you think that just anyone can be with my new son, Dr. Jerson?" Concerning this group of seniors, the hospital staff had already given up on them. When these seniors were together, they could really tease someone. Jerson had already been adopted without him even knowing, while the nurses were already granddaughter-in-laws to several senior citizens in the hospital. This was the everyday life of the hospital staff. Only 3 days were left before July could finally come to an end. Baymard had gone through a lot of changes throughout the month. So far, the first construction site was 80% completed, the second site is 72% completed, and the third site is 60% completed. When building, Landon utilized all his time effectively. When they were waiting for the concrete to harden, they went to the other industries and repeated the same procedures there. And with the help of 8,500 workers, the job got by quickly. Overall, Landon was happy with the overall construction progress. Within this month, the industries had also flourished and thrived on their own. All of them had accomplished their tasks for July by creating new products, and the hospital staff had also improved their skills as well. On the other hand, school would reopen on the second day of August. So Landon wanted to know how prepared the teachers were. As a king, it was necessary to have regular meetings with all parts of life in Baymard. Landon still remembered the day that he went over to the school for the end of semester results. Some children were crying so hard as they held their report card books. Their families were on the side, trying to cheer them up. Others smiled and jumped around as they were truly happy to advance to the next stage. Mother Winnie, Mother Kim, and Grace were also there as they congratulated Linda and little Momo for also advancing to the next stage. Some parents held their children's report cards and exclaimed proudly, "That's my girl. I knew you could do it. My boy is so smart. When we get back home, I'll buy meat and those delicious spices and make you a feast." Backslash. Those who failed were really sad, but when Landon made his encouraging speech, they quickly regained their confidence. They vowed to work hard and make their parents proud in the next semester. Before, they had really never taken school all that seriously, but when they looked at the happy faces of the other students and parents and compared it to their family's sad faces, they truly felt pain in their heart. Why didn't they try their best? Deep down, they knew that they didn't give it their all. They vowed, next time, they would make their parents smile like others. The results for this semester were actually pretty good. More than 70% of the students had advanced to the next class. Presently, all the teachers were now gathered and ready for their meeting with Landon. At the beginning of July, Landon had given a detailed outline of what everyone would be teaching, but today he was here to give them their schedules for the semester. Landon quickly distributed the papers to the teachers. There were also 4 new teachers from the group that came at the beginning of July, making a total of 14 teachers in Baymard. Chemistry 1, Mother Kim and Mother Winnie. Math 3, 2 teachers from the group. Math 2, Grace and 2 other teachers. Math 1, 2 new teachers that came in July. Pino 2, Lucy and 1 other teacher. Pino 1, 2 new teachers that came in July. Math 3 would incorporate everything from Math 2, but would also start teaching the students about fractions and decimals. This holiday break was used by all the teachers to get familiar with their new courses. During this holiday month, Landon had been teaching his Mother Kim and Winnie basic chemistry. He had even given them access to the alchemy industry during the daytime. They had learned a lot from Chief Wiggins and had also understood how to use the periodic table and what reactions were. In Landon's mind, these women were smart. Landon didn't want them to know everything. He just wanted them to know the basics. After all, even Chief Wiggins was still learning, so how could they know everything in one go? What they knew right now was enough to teach Chemistry 1, and that was good enough. They had gone to the alchemy lab and tested out a lot of things with several chemicals and the glass beakers. They wanted to test most of the reactions in the chemistry textbook, which Landon had given them. They had done several experiments and had observed the real meaning behind the different chemical reactions. They started by writing down the equations like Chief Wiggins advised, and coming out with the product that was to be formed at the end. They almost lost their cool when they were experimenting with reversible reactions. They placed water in glass beaker and added glucose to the water. After swirling the beaker for a while, the white powdery glucose substance dissolved, as if they didn't add anything to the liquid. They then added potassium hydroxide into the beaker to act as a catalyst for the reaction. They then added a few drops of methylene blue into the beaker and swirled. At the end, the liquid in the beaker had sky blue. At this point, they paused and wrote down their observations in their little notebooks. As they wrote, they realized that the blue was vanishing and the water was becoming clearer. What sort of magic was this? They were so shocked that they nearly broke the beaker from excitement. But when they swirled that same liquid again, it turned blue. Was this what a reversible reaction looked like? They opened their chemistry textbooks and observed that these were the characteristics of reversible reactions. From then on, apart from teaching their morning holiday catch-up classes, they would go to the alchemy industry and continue their experiments. Speaking of which, they really found it cool to wear those plastic lab coats, goggles, and so on. They felt that it made them look very professional. Everyone's teaching schedule was evenly spread out throughout the semester. The schedule gave them ample time to go about their lives. They were just happy that after this coming semester, they would have 4 months of complete freedom to themselves. The next semester started in August and ended on the last day of November. From there, they would have December till March as a holiday period. And the best part of it all was that would be no makeup classes during that period. Classes would depend on the teachers. If they felt like teaching for a month during their holiday, they could do so. Of course, after the holiday, school would start in April. His Highness had said that since the winter was bad, there was no point in having the children and citizens run here and there for classes. He had also told them that after the next 1 or 2 years, he would adjust the school periods so that summer was freed for the teachers and the students. But for now, their king felt that this was the best arrangement, and they couldn't agree more with him. They all knew how bad and cold winter got. It was better to stay indoors and rest. Plus, they really didn't want to wake up early in the morning during the winter season. They didn't know how their king was going to make the place warm, but since he had promised that he would do so, they had decided to wait and see. After meeting with the teachers, Landon headed over to the military fort. So far, Baymard started increasing their military in May. Although a handful of the original citizens of Baymard were recruited in the last week of April, Landon had already decided to add them to the group of those slaves and refugees that came in May. For those who were grouped as the new recruits that came in May, this month would be the end of their first 3-month period within their ranks. Landon had said that every 3 months, they would have an exam to test their skills and knowledge on what they had learned so far. And after 6 months, there would still be another exam. Those with good combined scores for both exams would move up a rank. Landon also discussed about the details of their exams and what he wanted to see from the recruits. At the end of the day, Landon took his tired, hungry body back to the castle. It was finally time for dinner. Royal Palace, capital of Jotun. / did you find them? / Queen Ivy asked. She had been looking for clues or hints about that SL *** Winnie and her bastard children. / my queen, we found a clue. Apparently, they were headed on a ship that came from the Empire of Corona. / a middle-aged mercenary answered as he kneeled in front of her. / good. Get your spies to head on out towards Corona. I want no errors this time. / Your Highness, my young master sends his regards to you. He's currently on his way to the Empire of Terike, so he sent us here to deliver the goods that you had previously ordered. Santa's subordinate said. Today was the first day of August, and once again, Santa wasn't here. Landon thought that it was very reasonable for Santa to first visit the customers that he knew way before Landon. Speaking of which, Santa had over 27 ships constantly moving about the continent of Pino. There was no doubt that all this must have cost Santa a fortune when he probably started his business. He probably began with maybe 3 ships and grew his way from there. Landon had previously heard from Santa that when he started his business, he got some of his rich clients to reward him with the ships instead of money. For Santa to have done that exchange, that meant that he had taken all this into account as capital at hand. Landon really thought that he must have really had a lot of capital to pull those stunts. His workers needed to be paid, and he was not running his business on love. So how that much was his capital to exchange his goods for ships? But little did Landon know that Santa was using his father's stolen money. Santa currently owned the largest merchant organization in Corona and also had several shops in every empire within the Pino continent. So, of course, he would have his ships constantly sailing all year round. Santa's absence today was totally within Landon's expectations. Santa did his business by carrying unique goods from one empire and bring it to the next. Obviously, his goods were selling like hotcakes in these empires, hence his popularity. For this month's goods, Landon had gotten all the animals and planting seeds that he had previously gotten in July. And once again, Baymard had welcomed quite a lot of people this time around. Landon settled the elderly, children, and the new military volunteers, as well as assigning people to work as caretakers. Once he was done, Landon was left with 5,400 new recruits. He sent 200 people to the hospital in the upper region, where they would undergo intensive training by all the nurses. Once they were done with their training, some of them would then be assigned to work in all the different clinics around Baymard. Landon also sent 500 people to the food industry, 500 to the alchemy industry, 1,500 to the construction industry, and kept the remaining 2,700 as construction workers at the sites. Landon gathered all the supervisors and gave them their assignments for the month. Chief Wiggins, there isn't any new product that I want your industry to focus on for now. Currently, 500 new workers have been assigned to your industry. I'll leave you the task of allocating each worker to any of the alchemy departments. No problem, Your Highness, Chief Wiggins replied. Actually, during Chief Wiggins' meeting with his supervisors, he had listened to their complaints and had also realized that some departments were really understaffed compared to the others. Now that he had 500 new workers, he would certainly try his best to settle them down. I've also made some corrections to the report that you gave me last week. If you follow it thoroughly, the problem with the alkyl group spirration should be fixed. Overall, the report you gave me was still very impressive. Well done, Landon said as he handed over a notebook to Chief Wiggins. Thank you, Your Highness. Landon took another file on his table and looked at Lior. Chief Lior, for this month, your industry also doesn't need to make any new products as well. I have also assigned 500 new workers to your industry. And like the case with the Chief Wiggins, I equally expect you to allocate them to each department within the food industry. I'm also impressed with your report and have also made a few minor corrections as well. Thank you, Your Highness, Chief Lior said as he took his report from Landon. In fact, Lior also had the same problem as Chief Wiggins. The supervisors within the food industry had also requested for more workers within their departments, especially the farming department, which Lior thought was very reasonable. Lior thought that the supervisors within the food industry were hilarious. They literally fought over the number of people who were to be assigned within the food industry. Before he had come to this meeting, each and every one of them had tried to sweet-talk him and even went as far as offering him food. Although he took their food, he was still going to distribute the new recruits where he deemed fit. Why did he take the food then? Because he was a pure food lover. Was it the food's fault that they had tried to sweet-talk him? And no, it wasn't. Since the food was innocent, there was no reason why he should deprive himself of eating. All he told them was that he would try his best. He didn't make any promises to anyone. HMMP. Serve them right. Who sent them to try and bribe him with food? Funny enough, all the supervisors were super tight with each other and liked to tease one another daily. But when it came to getting new recruits in their departments, they didn't mind cooking delicious meals for Chief Lior. Landon looked at Tim and smiled. Chief Tim, unlike other industries, this month I would require your industry to create a new department and produce a new product called toilet paper. I also need the porcelain and marble department to mold out sinks and toilet bowls. And finally, I will also work very closely with those electrical engineers in training to create something called a fluorescent light bulb. Tim already knew that there was no way that he would be free, not that he minded anyway. Toilet paper was essentially made from wood, so the toilet paper department would definitely have to be as close as possible to the wood-cutting department. Landon also specifically requested that most of the new recruits assigned to the construction industry should be placed in Department 6. Department 6 alone had 4 buildings assigned to it that basically did everything, from fixing and creating industrial equipment like wheelbarrows, saws, rods, nails, and so on, to creating metal house features like lockers, locks, doorknobs, pots, pans, spoons, to creating fuel-driven heavy machines, to building any metal feature that Landon required. These people were the most active within all the entire construction industry. Department 6 had about 8 different subsectors, all sharing 4 buildings within the industry. The only sector that didn't share a building with the rest was the one that created the fuel-based heavy machines. All these buildings were 3 to 5 floors high and all covered massive floor spaces. The first floor of each building had really high ceilings as well. When building build-estates in this era, nobles always tried their best to make it look as grand as those within the royal palaces. It sort of resembled the scene in Beauty and the Beast where Belle was having a dance with the Beast. The distance from the first floor to the ceiling was that high. Landon had destroyed 2/3 of the front walls to create a massive door for these heavy machines so that they could pass out of the building once built. Once successfully built, they would be driven and parked at the back of the estate in straight columns and rows. Anyway, since the new industries would almost be completed, Landon needed to make sure that there are enough doorknobs, door hinges, taps, and so on that were created. Department 6 also consisted of those workers who Landon had spent time teaching energy systems to. Those who learned were referred to as electrical engineers in training. These engineers in training had worked very closely with the other workers within Department 6 and created the heavy machines. They had placed and connected all the wires for the excavators, trucks, and so on. With the second construction site being the power plant, it would only make sense to start creating the bulbs in advance. So far, that was all that Landon required Department 6 to do. Landon further gave detailed instructions to Tim concerning the porcelain and marble department on how they were to mold the sinks and toilet bowls. Once construction was completed, these fixtures needed to be connected to the pipes and placed all around the buildings. So far, there were already so many porcelain and marble floor tiles ready for installation. Hence, Landon just needed them to focus on the sinks and toilet bowls for now. But Your Highness, what is this strange board thing that you want Department 13 to create? Tim asked, as he looked at the notes in his hands. It's a game. It's called chess. Author San here. Thank you guys for all the love and comments, red heart, red heart. But please, can some of you guys stop comparing my work to RTW? Loudly crying face, loudly crying face. Honestly, I just started reading it 3 weeks ago, and I can clearly see many reasons why my work can be compared with it or others. But you have to know that my world had no magic in it. Heck, RTW has witches that can even create picture I.Ds and so on. Baymard doesn't have a printer yet, which is obviously coming soon. But right now, Landon is waiting for printing services before he could finalize a lot of government issues. Everything takes time with humans, so please be patient. If there isn't anything that you think should have popped up already, you can suggest it to me, and if I really haven't thought of it, I would always reply and thank you all, like food, military weapons, and so on. P.S. Some of you give me the dopest ideas, red heart, smiling face with sunglasses, clapping hands. But if it concerns city development like trains, roads, policies, and so on, trust me, I've already thought of it. If I haven't put it out yet, then there is a good reason for that. Other novels have help with magic, while Landon needs people to get stuff done. Landon will only build what he sees is currently lacking for him to move forward. At the same time, he can only do so much within every month. So even if he needs more things, he would push and overwork the few people that he gets from Santa. The workers couldn't rush their progress. They needed time to learn and time to adapt by experimenting every month. Plus, unlike other fantasy novels, in real life, people needed to be trained in order to work or create stuff. Landon needed a hunter right now, but so what? In real life, people are normally educated by going to universities and having internships. These people in Baymard were literally learning on the job. So they needed time to adapt. And although this world is similar to Earth at the end of the day, it is Heartphilia and not Earth. Landon had seen people with naturally born blue hair and pinkish eyes. Bruh, this is a fantasy world in a different galaxy from Earth's galaxy. I believe that no one wants to read exactly what other novels offer. So as a writer, I would really appreciate it if people don't expect that my way would be exactly what read in other novels. I have to say, there was a certain person who kept bombarding me with RTW messages almost every hour of the day. Because of him, I started looking up on what RTW was. I have to say that it's an outstanding novel, but if you want to read that kind of novel, please go back and read it again. Leave Baymard out of this, because everything in that novel was made possible because of the witches. From melting iron to make cannons, to making laboratory glass beakers, to having a witch that can print and photocopy, to movie filming. And yet someone recommended that novel to me for a more realistic approach. Sigh. For the user who keeps messaging me daily about RTW, please let me rest, loudly crying face, loudly crying face. Of course, for all my Baymard fans, you're welcome to stay. Red heart, red heart, red heart, red heart.